She stared at the massive digital projection screen, watching $300 million of corporate valuation evaporate line. The most expensive engineers in the city were paralyzed, their faces pale under the crimson emergency lights. And somehow, the only person standing between a tech empire and total ruin was a woman wearing a coffee-stained apron. But to understand how the invisible girl behind the espresso counter ended up holding the keys to the kingdom, we need to go back to a Tuesday morning when everything was perfectly, agonizingly ordinary. Wishing you a day full of joy and good luck. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you are watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. At exactly 8 a.m., the Sterling Tech atrium smelled of dark roast Ethiopian beans and the sharp, sterile scent of commercial floor polish. Maya Vance stood behind the curved stainless steel counter of the executive coffee bar. Her dark hair was tied back in a severe, messy knot, and her hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. She leveled the espresso grounds in the portafilter, applying exactly 30 pounds of pressure, locking it into the group head with a fluid twist of her wrist. She was a ghost in this building. The people who walked past her wore imported Italian wool and carried leather briefcases that cost more than her monthly rent. They did not look at her. They looked through her. Marcus, the chief technology officer of Sterling Tech, approached the counter. He did not look up from the sleek silver laptop, balanced in his hands. "Make it fast, barista," Marcus ordered, his voice dripping with casual authority. "I have a board meeting in 10 minutes." "One double espresso, Mr. Ashford," Maya said, her tone perfectly neutral. "With almond milk," Marcus added, his eyes scanning the cascading lines of text on his screen. "Do not burn the milk this time." Maya did not burn the milk. She never burned the milk. But she did not defend herself. Instead, as she waited for the espresso machine to complete its extraction cycle, her eyes drifted to the glowing screen of his laptop. Marcus was reviewing the core firewall configuration for the company's new flagship software. The launch was scheduled for tomorrow. Maya wiped the marble counter, stepping just a fraction of an inch closer. Her eyes moved rapidly, digesting the complex syntax of the code. It was sloppy. The authentication loop was entirely fractured. "You have a structural error on line 412, Maya said quietly. Marcus froze. He slowly looked up from the screen, his expression twisting into a mask of pure condescension. "Excuse me?" Marcus asked. "The authentication sequence," Maya pointed with the corner of her clean white cloth. "You left the secondary port exposed. If a localized script targets that specific variable, your entire firewall will collapse inward." Marcus stared at her. Then a cruel, dismissive smile spread across his face. "Focus on the coffee, sweetheart," Marcus said, snatching the ceramic cup from the counter. "Leave the complex architecture to the professionals." "A professional would have closed the loop," Maya replied, her voice remaining completely level. Marcus leaned in, his face inches from the protective glass of the pastry display. "If you ever look at my screen again, I will have security escort you out of the building. And I will make sure you never pour coffee in this city again." He turned on his heel and walked away, his expensive leather shoes squeaking faintly against the polished floor. Maya watched him go. She felt the familiar, burning sting of humiliation rising in her chest. But she forced it down. She needed this job. She needed the medical insurance it provided for her sister. What she did not know was that the code Marcus was carrying away was already failing. By 8:30 a.m., the morning rush had slowed to a steady trickle. Maya was wiping down the steam wands when the heavy revolving doors at the front of the atrium turned smoothly, letting in a sudden rush of cold November air. The ambient noise in the massive room seemed to instantly drop. Liam Sterling walked into the building. He was the chief executive officer and the sole founder of Sterling Tech. He was a man who commanded gravity. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his broad shoulders pulled back, his dark eyes fixed entirely on the mobile device in his hand. He looked brilliant, untouchable, and completely exhausted. Trailing exactly 3 steps behind him was a small boy. Leo was 6 years old. He wore a navy blue sweater that was slightly too large for him, and he clutched a thick drawing pad against his chest with both arms. His small sneakers gripped the slick floor as he tried to keep up with his father's relentless, driving pace. "Dad, look at the robot," Leo said, his voice small and fragile in the cavernous atrium. Liam did not slow down. He did not look away from his glowing screen. "Not right now, Leo," Liam replied, his tone clipped and professional, as if he were speaking to an underperforming intern. "I have a conference call with the London investors." "But I gave him armor," Leo tried again, holding the drawing pad up higher, "so he will not get hurt." "Go sit with Jenna," Liam ordered, gesturing vaguely toward the executive elevators without breaking his stride. "She has your educational tablet. Do not interrupt her while she is working." Liam walked straight past the coffee bar and stepped into the waiting elevator, the metal doors sliding shut and severing the connection between father and son. Leo stood alone in the middle of the vast lobby. His shoulders dropped. He lowered the drawing pad, the picture of the armored robot pressing against his knees. Behind the espresso machine, Maya felt a sharp, physical ache in her ribs. She recognized that posture. She knew exactly what it felt like to be entirely invisible to the one person who was supposed to see you. She remembered standing in the doorway of her own childhood home, holding a perfect report card while her parents argued about money in the kitchen. Maya grabbed a fresh chocolate croissant from the display case. She placed it carefully on a small porcelain plate and walked out from behind her counter. "Excuse me," Maya said, approaching the boy slowly. "Are you the lead designer for the robotics division?" Leo looked up, his large brown eyes wide with surprise. "I am just Leo." "Well, just Leo," Maya said, offering the plate with a warm, genuine smile. "I was told the lead designer requested a chocolate croissant, and I always deliver to my best clients." Leo looked at the pastry, then up at Maya's face. For a moment, the heavy sadness in his eyes lifted. He reached out to take the plate, and that single, quiet moment was shattered in an instant. A synthetic emergency siren echoed through the massive space, the sound sharp enough to rattle the glass walls. The overhead fluorescent lights suddenly cut out, plunging the entire atrium into a heavy darkness. A second later, the backup generators engaged, bathing the lobby in a harsh, pulsing crimson light. Total chaos consumed the Sterling Tech headquarters. The massive presentation monitors that lined the atrium walls, which usually displayed corporate logos and stock projections, flickered violently. The images vanished, replaced by a solid black screen. Glowing green text began to type itself across the monitors in a terrifying, methodical rhythm. System lockout protocol initiated. Encryption at 40%. Maya pushed Leo gently under the sturdy overhang of the coffee counter. "Stay right here," she instructed firmly. "Do not move until I come back for you." She stood up and looked toward the main security gates leading to the server floor. Developers and executives were sprinting across the marble, their voices overlapping in a wave of raw panic. Maya abandoned her apron, tossing it onto the espresso machine. She ran toward the security gates, slipping through the turnstiles, right behind a group of frantic engineers. The server floor was a war zone. Marcus stood in the center of the room, his laptop connected to the main diagnostic terminal. Sweat was pouring down his face, staining the collar of his expensive shirt. His hands trembled so violently he could barely strike the keys. "They are encrypting the main drive," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "I cannot bypass the override. The system is rejecting every command." Liam Sterling pushed his way through the crowd of terrified engineers. He looked like a king watching his castle burn. "Stop them, Marcus," Liam demanded, his voice possessing a dark, dangerous edge. "We go public at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If we lose that source code, we lose the entire company. Stop the encryption." "I am trying," Marcus shouted back, his fingers slipping on the keyboard. "They lock the administrative credentials. They have total control of the root directory. It is over." Maya watched the large digital counter projected on the wall. 45%. 50%. She thought about Clara. She thought about the stack of medical bills sitting on her tiny kitchen table in Brooklyn. If Sterling Tech went bankrupt today, Maya would not receive her paycheck on Friday. If she did not receive her paycheck, her sister would miss her next treatment. Survival makes people bold. Maya stepped forward. She pushed past two senior developers, walked directly up to the main terminal, and shoved Marcus hard in the shoulder, physically displacing him from the keyboard. "Hey!" Marcus shouted indignantly, stumbling backward. "What do you think you are doing?" "Saving your career, Mr. Ashford," Maya replied, her eyes locked on the glowing screen. She placed her hands on the keyboard. The moment her fingertips met the plastic, her entire posture changed. The invisible barista vanished. She bypassed the graphical interface entirely, opening a raw command terminal that looked like pure gibberish to the marketing executives watching in horror. "Security!" Marcus screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Get her away from the terminal. She is going to delete the servers." Liam extended his arm, his hand hitting Marcus right in the center of his chest, pinning the chief technology officer in place. "Let her work," Liam commanded, his eyes fixed intensely on Maya. Maya did not hesitate. Her fingers moved with a speed and precision that left the room completely breathless. She recognized the malware signature immediately. It was the exact vulnerability she had tried to point out to Marcus 45 minutes earlier. The attackers were using a recursive loop to lock the doors from the inside. To break a lock from the inside, you do not use a key. You break the door. "Encryption halted," Maya announced softly, striking the Enter key with absolute authority. The pulsing crimson lights above them instantly deactivated. The standard white overhead lights illuminated the server room once more. The massive monitors on the wall returned to the Sterling Tech logo. The digital counter vanished. "I isolated the malware in a secondary sandbox environment and severed all external routing connections," Maya explained, stepping back from the terminal and crossing her arms. "Your source code is completely secure." Marcus stared at the terminal screen, his mouth hanging open in utter disbelief. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Liam Sterling turned his gaze slowly from the saved data on the screen to the woman standing before him. The silence in the server room was profound. He looked at her simple clothes, her messy hair, and the fierce, unapologetic intelligence burning in her eyes. "Who are you?" Liam asked, his voice low, calculated, and entirely mesmerized. "I am the person who makes your coffee, Mr. Sterling," Maya said, lifting her chin slightly, "and I should get back to it. The milk is getting cold." The heavy security doors of the server room closed behind Maya, the metal latch sliding firmly into place and cutting off the frantic voices of the engineering team. She stood in the carpeted hallway for a long moment, pressing her shoulders against the cool wall. The adrenaline that had propelled her past the executive security lines was rapidly leaving her bloodstream, leaving her knees feeling weak and her hands trembling. She looked down at her hands. They were dusted with finely ground espresso beans and marked by a tiny burn scar near her left thumb. 5 minutes ago, those hands had rewritten the security architecture of $1 billion company. Now, she just needed to get back to her station before the morning manager noticed she had abandoned the cash register. Maya walked back into the massive glass atrium. The emergency lights had fully receded, and the morning sun was once again pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She rounded the corner of the coffee bar and dropped to her knees. Leo was sitting exactly where she had left him, his small arms wrapped tightly around his knees, his drawing pad resting on the floor. "The red lights went away," Leo said, his voice hesitant. "They did," Maya said, offering him a soft, reassuring smile. "The system just had a bad dream. Everything is awake now." She reached up to the counter, grabbed the small porcelain plate, holding the chocolate croissant, and handed it to him. Leo took it carefully, his eyes reflecting a quiet gratitude that no 6-year-old child should have to express. "Thank you, miss," Leo said. "You can call me Maya," she replied, standing up and tying her green apron back around her waist. 2 floors above them, standing on the interior glass balcony of the executive mezzanine, Liam Sterling was watching her. He gripped the stainless steel railing so tightly his knuckles turned entirely white. Beside him stood Jenna, his executive assistant, clutching a digital tablet to her chest. "The server logs confirm it," Jenna said, her voice hushed with disbelief. "She did not just stop the encryption, Mr. Sterling. She rewrote the access protocols in less than 3 minutes. Marcus is down there having a complete breakdown. He says what she did was mathematically impossible." Liam did not look at his assistant. His dark eyes remained fixed on the barista below, watching as she gently wiped the counter, her posture completely unassuming. She had just saved his life's work, and now she was returning to steaming milk, as if nothing had happened. "Nothing is mathematically impossible," Liam murmured, his mind racing through 1,000 different calculations. "People simply fail to see the correct equation." "What would you like me to do about Marcus?" Jenna asked. "Let Marcus sweat," Liam commanded, finally turning away from the railing. "I want you to pull her employment file. I want to know where she came from, who hired her, and why she is pouring coffee in my lobby. And, Jenna—" "Yes, Mr. Sterling." "Tell security to grant her top-floor access," Liam said, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. "I want her in my office at exactly 1 p.m." The top floor of the Sterling Tech headquarters was a different world. When Maya stepped out of the private executive elevator at exactly 1 p.m., the air felt noticeably thinner, filtered through advanced purification systems that smelled faintly of expensive cedar and lemon water. The carpets were so thick they absorbed the sound of her footsteps entirely. Jenna met her at the reception desk, offering a polite but intensely curious smile. "Right this way, Miss Vance," Jenna said, leading her down a wide corridor lined with modern art that Maya knew cost more than a college education. They reached a massive set of double doors carved from dark walnut. Jenna opened them, gesturing for Maya to enter. Liam Sterling's corner office was intimidating by design. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding, unobstructed view of the Manhattan skyline. There were no messy stacks of paper, no loose wires, no personal photographs. It was a space designed for total control. Liam sat behind a minimalist glass desk. He was not looking at a computer monitor. He was waiting for her. "Have a seat," Liam said, his voice resonating in the quiet room. Maya remained standing. She crossed her arms over her chest, fully aware that her faded jeans and basic cotton shirt looked entirely out of place in the pristine environment. She had taken off the green apron, but she still felt the invisible weight of it. I prefer to stand, Mr. Sterling, Maya said. My manager only gave me a 15-minute break. Liam evaluated her for a long moment. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and produced a thick, crisp, white envelope. He placed it onto the glass desk and pushed it forward using 2 fingers. It slid smoothly, stopping precisely at the edge closest to Maya. The board of directors is very protective of our intellectual property, Liam began, leaning back in his leather chair. Marcus informed me that you executed a lucky override command. He believes you memorized a sequence from watching the senior engineers. Regardless of how you managed it, your intervention prevented a catastrophic delay in our public offering. Maya stared at the envelope. She knew exactly what it was. This is a token of our gratitude, Liam continued, his tone perfectly measured, entirely devoid of emotion. A certified bank check for $10,000. Consider it a bonus. Maya looked from the envelope to Liam's face. He was looking at her the way a wealthy man looks at a valet who parked his car particularly well. He was paying for a service, closing a transaction, and ensuring the established class hierarchy remained perfectly intact. She walked forward and picked up the envelope. It felt heavy in her hand. $10,000. It was the exact amount she needed to clear her sister's outstanding hospital debt. It was a miracle wrapped in premium cardstock, and it was the most insulting thing anyone had ever handed her. $10,000, Maya said, her voice dangerously soft, for saving a $300 million software launch. It is a very generous amount for a coffee vendor, Liam replied, his jaw tightening slightly. Maya let out a short, humorless laugh. She did not raise her voice, but the sudden sharpness in her tone commanded the room. You think I got lucky, Maya stated, taking a step closer to the desk. You think I watched your developers and memorized a sequence. Your chief technology officer is lying to you to cover his own profound incompetence. Liam narrowed his eyes. Excuse me? Your firewall is a glass house built on quicksand, Maya said, her words flowing with lethal precision. Your routing protocols are outdated. You rely on a secondary validation loop that leaves your administrative ports completely exposed to a brute force recursive attack. The malware did not break into your system, Mr. Sterling. It walked right through the front door, because Marcus left it wide open. Liam sat up straight, the casual arrogance entirely gone from his posture. He was staring at her as if she had just spoken a dead language. A first-year student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology could have breached your servers before their morning classes, Maya continued, tapping the envelope against her palm. I know this because 3 years ago I was sitting in those exact classes, writing the security algorithms your developers are failing to copy. The silence in the soundproof office was absolute. Liam looked at the young woman standing before him, realizing with a sudden sinking feeling that he had miscalculated entirely. Maya slipped the envelope into the back pocket of her jeans. I will take your money because I need it, Maya said, turning toward the heavy walnut doors. But do not ever confuse my uniform with my intellect. You have a massive security flaw in your architecture. If you do not fix it, your company will not survive the week. Have a wonderful afternoon. She walked out of the office, the doors closing smoothly behind her. Liam remained frozen in his chair. He looked at the empty space where she had just been standing. The air in the room felt entirely different. Jenna stepped into the office holding her digital tablet. Did the barista just lecture me on my own network architecture? Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Mr. Sterling, Jenna replied, adjusting her glasses. And if you want my professional opinion, she is entirely correct. The transition from the gleaming, sterile towers of Manhattan to the gritty, vibrating streets of Brooklyn always felt like traveling between 2 different planets. At 7 p.m., Maya climbed the 3 narrow flights of stairs to her apartment. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old floor wax. The wooden floorboards creaked under her weight, a familiar, comforting sound that told her she was finally home. She unlocked the door to apartment 3B. The space was tiny, dominated by a small kitchenette and a single window that looked out onto a brick alleyway. The old iron radiator vibrated against the peeling wallpaper, fighting a losing battle against the November chill. Clara was lying on the faded yellow couch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. She was 19 years old, but the aggressive treatments for her autoimmune disease had left her looking fragile, her cheekbones sharp and prominent, her skin possessing a translucent, delicate quality. "You are home late," Clara said, setting down her textbook. She was studying graphic design online, determined not to let her illness pause her entire life. "We had a situation at the office," Maya said, taking off her coat and hanging it on a broken brass hook near the door. "Did someone complain about the foam art again?" Clara teased, her voice raspy, but full of warmth. Maya walked over to the couch. She reached into her back pocket, pulled out the crisp white envelope, and placed it onto the open pages of Clara's textbook. "No," Maya said quietly. "Nobody complained." Clara looked at the envelope. She saw the embossed Sterling Tech logo in the top corner. Slowly, her pale fingers reached out and pulled the heavy cardstock open. She unfolded the certified bank check. Clara stopped breathing for a full 3 seconds. Her eyes widened, scanning the numbers printed in bold black ink. "Maya," Clara whispered, her hands beginning to shake, "this is $10,000. Why did a tech billionaire give you $10,000? Please tell me you did not do anything illegal." "I did the opposite of illegal," Maya said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table, so she was eye level with her sister. "The company was hacked. Their engineers panicked. I stepped in and fixed the code. The CEO gave me this as a bonus." Tears immediately welled in Clara's eyes. The crushing weight of their medical debt had been a silent, suffocating presence in their tiny apartment for 3 years. It was the reason Maya had dropped out of the most prestigious engineering program in the country. It was the reason Maya woke up at 4 in the morning to grind coffee beans instead of designing software. "This covers the hospital," Clara said, a tear escaping and tracing a path down her pale cheek. "This covers the outstanding balance. Maya, you can go back to school. You can finally go back." Maya reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind Clara's ear. "One step at a time. First, we pay the hospital. Then we breathe." "You saved them," Clara said, looking at the check with absolute reverence. "You saved a billion-dollar company." "And they treated me like a broken vending machine," Maya admitted, a bitter smile touching her lips. "But it does not matter. We have the money. We are safe." Maya stood up, feeling a sudden, desperate urge to look at her own code. Whenever the world felt too heavy, she escaped into the flawless, logical architecture of computer programming. She walked over to her canvas tote bag resting on the kitchen counter, reaching inside for her worn, leather-bound notebook. Her fingers met empty space. Maya pulled the bag open entirely, searching frantically through her keys, her wallet, and her spare apron. The notebook was gone. Her heart dropped into her stomach. That notebook contained 3 years of her most advanced, proprietary algorithms. It was her private world. It was the only proof she had that she was still a genius, not just a girl pouring coffee. She closed her eyes, mentally retracing her exact steps. The morning rush. The hack. The server room. Taking Leo his hot chocolate. Sitting at the corner table in the atrium. She had left it on the table. Maya looked at the small digital clock on the microwave. It was almost 8 p.m. The cleaning crews at Sterling Tech discarded anything left in the common areas by midnight. "I have to go back," Maya said, grabbing her coat off the hook. "Right now?" Clara asked, looking confused. "It is freezing outside." "I forgot something important," Maya said, wrapping her scarf tightly around her neck. "Lock the door behind me. I will be back as soon as I can." She ran out of the apartment, her footsteps echoing rapidly down the wooden stairs, sprinting back toward the world she had just sworn to leave behind. She had no idea that the man waiting for her in the shadows of the atrium was about to change the trajectory of her entire life. The late-night subway train was practically empty, carrying Maya back toward the financial district. She leaned her head against the cold glass of the window, watching the dark tunnels blur past. Her muscles ached with an intense heavy fatigue, but the adrenaline of losing her most valuable possession kept her heart racing in her chest. By the time she reached the Sterling Tech building, the digital clock above the security desk read exactly 11 p.m. The towering glass atrium, which was a hive of chaotic corporate energy during the day, was now a vast, silent cavern. The main lights were dimmed to a fraction of their normal brightness, casting long, dramatic shadows across the polished marble floors. Maya approached the night guard, a kind older man named Thomas, who usually ignored the executive staff but always smiled at the coffee vendors. "I forgot my personal notebook at the barista station, Thomas," Maya said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Can I just run in and grab it?" Thomas checked his physical ledger. "You are not on the after-hours access list, Maya. But Mr. Sterling is still upstairs. He left strict orders that the lobby remain unlocked until he departs. Make it quick before the patrol sweep." Maya nodded her thanks and walked rapidly past the security barriers. The silence of the atrium felt heavy, almost unnatural. She bypassed the espresso machines and headed straight for the small, round tables tucked into the corner near the executive elevators. That was where she had sat with Leo. That was where she had drawn the logic puzzles. She rounded the corner and stopped completely still. She was not alone. Liam Sterling was sitting in the exact chair she had occupied hours earlier. The area was illuminated only by a single overhead architectural light. Liam had discarded his expensive suit jacket. His tie was loosened, the top two buttons of his crisp white shirt unfastened. He looked entirely exhausted, stripped of the terrifying corporate armor he wore. During the day, resting flat on the table in front of him, open to the very middle page, was her worn, leather-bound notebook. Maya felt a sudden, intense spike of defensiveness. That notebook contained the raw, unfiltered architecture of her mind. It was deeply private. "You are invading my privacy," Maya stated, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet room. Liam looked up. He did not look startled. He looked like a man who had just discovered an entirely new continent and did not know how to map it. "I was waiting for you," Liam said, his voice low and incredibly steady. He did not close the notebook. He tapped his index finger against the open page. "You wrote a predictive compression algorithm in here. The syntax is flawless. It uses a recursive neural network loop to anticipate data bottlenecks before they even formulate." Maya crossed her arms defensively, her fingernails digging into the fabric of her winter coat. "I am aware of what I wrote, Mr. Sterling. I would like it back, please." Liam stood up slowly. He picked up the notebook, holding it with a surprising level of reverence. "This is not just good code, Maya," Liam said, stepping closer to her. The physical proximity made her breath catch slightly in her throat. "This is industry-altering mathematics. My senior engineers have been trying to build a compression sequence like this for 16 months, and they are failing. You solved it in the margins of a notebook stained with coffee rings." He looked directly into her eyes, stripping away the distance between them. Why are you steaming milk in my lobby? Maya held his gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to be intimidated. Because 3 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. My younger sister, Clara, was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disease a month later. The medical bills were astronomical. I could not stay enrolled at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and keep her alive at the same time. Liam absorbed her words, the absolute gravity of her situation settling over him. He looked down at the handwritten pages again. You sacrificed your entire future. You gave up a brilliant career. I saved my sister, Maya corrected him firmly, her voice thick with emotion. That is not a sacrifice. That is a choice. I took the first job that offered immediate, comprehensive health benefits and a predictable schedule. I do not regret it, but I also do not intend to stop writing code. Liam closed a notebook gently. The harsh lines of his face softened, revealing a profound, deeply buried sadness. My wife passed away 3 years ago, Liam confessed. The words seemed to escape his lips against his will, hanging in the quiet air between them. It was sudden. I thought the best way to honor her memory was to secure Leo's future. So I threw myself into building this empire. I worked 90-hour weeks. I built a fortress of servers and firewalls. He took another step closer, holding the notebook out to her. And today, Liam continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, I stood on a balcony and watched a woman in a green apron make my son smile for the first time in 6 months. I have built an entire technological empire, Maya, but I am failing completely as a father. Maya took the notebook from his hands. Their fingers brushed against each other for a fraction of a second, sending a sudden, startling jolt of warmth up her arm. She saw the absolute exhaustion in his eyes, the mirror image of her own relentless struggle. They were two people drowning in different oceans, but fighting the exact same current. You are not failing, Liam, Maya said softly, using his first name without realizing it. You are just focusing on the code instead of the user experience. Leo does not need a fortress. He just needs you to look away from the screen. Liam looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. The air between them suddenly felt incredibly dense, charged with a magnetic, undeniable tension. He let out a long breath, releasing a burden he had been carrying for years. I made a severe miscalculation today, Liam said, taking a step back to re-establish the professional boundary. Handing you that envelope was an insult to your intellect. It was highly inefficient, Maya agreed, a tiny, genuine smile pulling at the corner of her lips. I intend to correct it, Liam stated, his voice recovering its commanding executive edge. I want you in my boardroom at 8 a.m. tomorrow. We are going to fix the architecture of my company. He turned to walk away. Retrieving his suit jacket from the chair, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. And Maya, Liam added, do not wear the green apron. The executive boardroom of Sterling Tech smelled of expensive catered pastries and intense anxiety. At exactly 8 a.m., Marcus stood at the head of the massive custom-built glass table. He was surrounded by 12 members of the board of directors, all of them wearing stiff collars and expressions of deep concern. The public offering was scheduled for the following morning, and the financial press was already asking dangerous questions about yesterday's sudden system lockdown. The security anomaly was completely contained, Marcus assured the room, using a laser pointer to highlight a rising graph on the projection screen. We experienced a minor external disruption. My team implemented an immediate patch. The firewall is stronger than ever. The public offering will proceed without a single problem. The heavy oak double doors opened, swinging wide on their silent hinges. Liam walked into the room, projecting absolute authority. He wore a flawless navy suit, his expression a mask of pure corporate power. Right behind him was Maya. She did not look like the invisible girl who poured their coffee. She wore a sharp, tailored navy blue blazer that she had bought at a thrift store and altered herself, paired with crisp dress trousers and a simple white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek, professional style. She looked fierce. She looked like she belonged at the table. Marcus stopped, speaking mid-sentence. He lowered the laser pointer, his face contorting into a mask of pure outrage. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice tight, "what is the barista doing in a confidential board meeting?" Liam walked to the head of the table, claiming his heavy leather chair. He gestured for Maya to take the empty seat directly to his right. "Maya Vance is no longer managing the Atrium Coffee Station," Liam announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the long room. "Effective immediately, she is the lead security analyst for Sterling Tech. She will report directly to me, bypassing the standard engineering hierarchy." The boardroom erupted into chaotic, overlapping arguments. Board members leaned forward, demanding explanations. Marcus brought his hand down hard against the glass tabletop, the impact echoing sharply across the long room. "This is an absolute outrage," Marcus argued, his face turning an angry shade of red. "You are putting a college dropout in charge of our core architecture. The day before we go public, she is a coffee vendor. I am putting the only person who actually stopped the hack in charge of making sure it never happens again," Liam replied smoothly, shutting down the noise in the room with a single icy look. "Marcus, your team failed yesterday. Maya succeeded. She has spent the entire night auditing the code you claimed was secure. Maya, please share your initial findings with the board." Maya stood up. She did not rush. She connected her small silver laptop to the main presentation interface. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice steady and commanding, showing zero intimidation. "Your current firewall relies on an incredibly outdated validation loop. During the attack yesterday, the malware did not break through your external defenses. It walked right through the front door using administrative credentials." She advanced the presentation slide. A complex string of server logs appeared on the massive screen. "Someone inside this building authorized the bypass," Maya explained, making direct eye contact with the board members. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Are you standing there, accusing me of corporate sabotage?" "I am stating a factual reality based on the unalterable system logs," Maya replied, refusing to back down an inch. "The credentials used to initiate the lockdown belonged to the executive engineering tier, specifically your tier." "This is absurd," Marcus shouted, looking frantically at the board of directors for support. "She fabricated these logs to justify her promotion." "Enough," Liam commanded, his voice slicing through the argument like a blade. "Marcus, you will hand over all administrative root access to Maya for a full, unrestricted system audit. That is an executive order, not a request. If you refuse, you can hand your security badge to the guards on your way out." Marcus looked furiously between Liam and Maya. He was trapped. His jaw tightened in pure, unadulterated hatred. He looked at Maya, his eyes cold and calculating. It was a silent, undeniable declaration of war. "You will severely regret this decision, Liam," Marcus said smoothly, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. He threw his laser pointer onto the table and walked out of the room, leaving a heavy, tense silence in his wake. Jenna, who was sitting in the corner quietly taking minutes for the meeting, looked up from her digital tablet and offered Maya a deeply satisfied, discreet smile. Maya sat back down. She had won the battle, but she knew the war had just begun. The engineering floor at Sterling Tech was affectionately referred to as the War Room. It was a massive open-plan space dominated by long rows of dual-monitor workstations. The continuous rush of air from the massive server cooling units provided a constant, heavy background noise. The room smelled of ozone, warm electronics, and stale energy drinks. At exactly 10 a.m., Maya walked through the glass security doors. She carried her silver laptop under one arm. The entire floor went entirely still. 50 male developers, all wearing expensive branded hoodies and noise-canceling headphones, stopped typing. They stared at her. They had all heard the rumors circulating since the board meeting. They knew she was the barista. They knew she had just humiliated their boss. Maya ignored the hostile stares. She walked directly to the elevated desk at the front of the room previously reserved for the deputy engineering director. She set her laptop down and opened the screen. A tall man with an arrogant smirk detached himself from a group of developers and sauntered over to her desk. His name badge read Todd, Senior Developer. He was Marcus's right-hand man. "So," Todd said, leaning heavily against the edge of her desk and crossing his arms, "you are the new coffee girl, playing security chief. Marcus said Liam lost his mind and gave you root access." "My name is Maya," she said, not looking up from her screen as she initiated her login sequence. "And I am here to fix the structural vulnerabilities your team has been ignoring for 6 months." Todd laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. He turned to the other developers watching the exchange. "She thinks she can fix the architecture. Look, Maya, we are working on a critical routing bug in the payment gateway. We have been trying to patch it for 3 days. Why do you not show us your barista magic?" He pushed a secondary monitor toward her, displaying a wildly complex string of broken code. It was a deliberate hazing ritual. They expected her to freeze, to panic, to prove she did not belong in their elite club. Maya finally looked up. She looked at Todd, then looked at the code on the screen. She did not sit down. "You are using a linear search function to query a massive encrypted database," Maya said, her tone laced with casual boredom. "That is why your gateway is timing out. It is bloated." She reached across the desk, her fingers dancing across the mechanical keys with fluid, relentless speed. She deleted 30 lines of their code in a single stroke. "Hey," Todd protested, lunging forward. "Do not delete that. I am replacing your inefficient garbage with a binary search algorithm," Maya stated, continuing to type without breaking her rhythm. "It cuts your processing time by 80% and closes the memory leak. And I added an asynchronous callback, so the user interface does not freeze while the server authenticates the transaction." She hit the execute key and stepped back, gesturing to the monitor with an open palm. The compilation sequence ran flawlessly. The green text indicated a complete, error-free execution. The payment gateway, which had been broken for 3 days, processed a simulated transaction in less than half a second. The developers standing around the desk stared at the screen in absolute stunned silence. "You can return to your desks now," Maya instructed, opening her own laptop and dismissing them completely. "And Todd, next time you try to test me, bring me a problem that actually requires me to sit down." Todd turned pale. He pushed himself off her desk and retreated without saying a single word. The other engineers quickly scrambled back to their workstations, casting nervous, respectful glances in her direction. Maya smiled to herself. She had established absolute dominance. She turned her attention back to her own screen, pulling up the deep administrative logs to begin her promised audit of Marcus's files. She began filtering the network traffic from the exact moment of yesterday's hack. 10 minutes into her search, her smile vanished entirely. Buried deep within a highly restricted folder, heavily encrypted and disguised as a routine system update, she found a strange hidden file. It was an outbound data packet. The ransomware attack had not just been designed to lock the system down. It had been designed to create a massive distraction, while this specific packet was quietly exported through a back door. Someone was not just trying to hold Sterling Tech hostage. Someone was stealing from them from the inside. And the security clearance required to hide this file belonged to only one person, Marcus. Maya felt a sudden, sharp thrill of danger run down her spine. The stakes had just multiplied by 10. By exactly 12 p.m., the adrenaline of the morning confrontation had begun to wear off, leaving Maya with a hollow ache in her stomach. She left the heavy ozone-scented air of the engineering floor and took the private elevator up to the executive suite. The executive break room was a masterpiece of modern interior design. It featured sweeping panoramic windows overlooking the dense concrete jungle of Manhattan, countertops carved from imported white marble, and an ambient temperature that was always perfectly regulated. It smelled of freshly cut lilies and infused lemon water, a stark contrast to the burnt coffee and industrial cleaner she was used to breathing in the lobby below. Maya walked straight toward the massive, chrome-plated espresso machine resting in the corner. Old habits died hard. The machine was a custom Italian model that cost more than a reliable used car. She began pulling a double shot of espresso, finding an anchor of comfort in the precise, methodical process of tamping the finely ground beans and watching the rich, dark liquid extract into a porcelain cup. The heavy glass door of the break room swung inward on silent hinges. Jenna walked in, carrying her digital tablet. She wore a tailored gray pencil skirt and a silk blouse, not a single hair out of place. She stopped and watched Maya operate the machine, with an expression of quiet amusement. "You do know that Mr. Sterling hired a private catering company to maintain this room, correct?" Jenna asked, walking over to the marble island. "You are the lead security analyst now, Maya. You do not have to make your own coffee." "I do not trust anyone else to calibrate the pressure properly," Maya replied, turning off the extraction cycle and handing Jenna a perfectly layered cappuccino without being asked. "And besides, this machine is practically a work of art. It would be a tragedy to let an amateur touch it." Jenna took the cup, inhaling the rich aroma. She took a slow sip, and her eyes widened in genuine appreciation. "All right," Jenna conceded, leaning against the counter. "You are officially forbidden from letting the catering staff make my afternoon coffee ever again. This is extraordinary." Maya smiled, leaning back against the cool marble. "Consider it a bribe for keeping me alive today. I saw the way those board members looked at me. If looks could cause physical trauma, I would be in the intensive care unit." Jenna's smile faded slightly, replaced by a sharp, calculating seriousness. She set her porcelain cup down and looked around the empty break room to ensure they were entirely alone. "You need to be extremely careful," Jenna warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You embarrassed Marcus in front of the entire executive tier. You took his authority, and you exposed his incompetence. Men like Marcus Ashford do not simply apologize and move on. They hold grudges until they can destroy you." "I am not afraid of him," Maya stated, taking a sip of her own dark espresso. "His code is sloppy. His firewall is a joke. He relies on intimidation because he lacks actual talent." "Talent is not the only currency in this building," Jenna countered smoothly. "Marcus has powerful friends. The chairman of the board is his godfather. They play golf together at a private country club in the Hamptons every single Sunday. Marcus convinced the board that he was the golden child of this company long before Liam even hired you." Maya felt a cold weight settle in her chest. She had focused entirely on the digital architecture, completely ignoring the complex, treacherous political architecture of the corporate world. "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked, looking at the assistant closely. "Because I have watched brilliant, capable women get crushed by the fragile egos of mediocre tech executives for the past 5 years," Jenna said, her eyes fierce and unyielding. "And because you are the first person who ever had the courage to tell Mr. Sterling he was wrong directly to his face. I want you to win, Maya, but to win you have to play the game on their level." Maya nodded slowly, digesting the gravity of the warning. "How do I play their game?" "You start by showing the board of directors that you belong in their world," Jenna explained, picking up her digital tablet and scrolling rapidly. "This Saturday evening, Sterling Tech is hosting its annual charity gala at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Every major investor, board member, and technology journalist in the city will be attending." Jenna looked up, offering a challenging, brilliant smile. "Liam is going to formally introduce you to the press as his new lead security analyst," Jenna said. "Marcus will be there, smiling for the cameras, waiting for you to look like a girl who wandered in from the coffee shop. You cannot give him that satisfaction." "I do not have anything to wear to a high society charity gala," Maya admitted, feeling a sudden, sharp spike of anxiety. "My wardrobe consists of denim, cotton shirts, and one blazer." "Leave that to me," Jenna declared, finishing the last drop of her cappuccino. "We are going shopping on Saturday morning. And, Maya, you are going to look so devastatingly professional that Marcus will choke on his expensive champagne." At 4 p.m., the afternoon sun cast long, golden rays across the polished marble floor of the Sterling Tech atrium. Maya needed a break from the intense, eye-straining work of auditing Marcus's deeply encrypted files. She walked out of the private elevator and headed toward the corner of the lobby. She was not wearing her apron, but she walked behind the espresso counter anyway, offering a warm nod to the afternoon barista, who quickly stepped aside for the new executive. Maya prepared a massive ceramic mug of hot chocolate, carefully adding a mountain of whipped cream and dusting it with dark cocoa powder. She walked around the counter and headed toward the small, round tables tucked near the glass wall. Leo was sitting in his usual chair, swinging his legs. He was not drawing today. He was staring blankly at a high-end educational tablet, his small fingers tapping the screen with obvious frustration. "I heard a rumor that the lead robotics designer was having a difficult afternoon," Maya announced softly, placing the steaming mug on the table in front of him. Leo looked up, his face instantly lighting up with genuine joy. "Maya, you do not have the green apron today. You look like the people who yell into their phones." Maya laughed, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down. "I promise I will not yell into my phone. I got a promotion today, Leo. I work upstairs now, with the computers." "Did my dad promote you?" Leo asked, taking a careful sip of the hot chocolate, and getting a thick line of whipped cream on his upper lip. "He did," Maya confirmed, handing him a paper napkin. "What are you working on? You look very angry at that screen." "Jenna gave me a puzzle game," Leo explained, pushing the tablet across the table, "so she could see it. You have to make the digital turtle walk through the maze. But my turtle keeps hitting the red walls and stopping. It is stupid." Maya looked at the screen. It was a visual coding application designed for children. Instead of writing complex syntax, the user dragged and dropped colored blocks of logic commands to create a sequence of actions. "The turtle is not stupid," Maya said gently, turning the tablet so they could both see it. "He just only knows exactly what you tell him. Look at your sequence right here." She pointed to a blue logic block. "You told him to walk forward 3 steps and then turn right," Maya explained, her voice soothing and patient. but the hallway in the maze is only 2 steps long. So he hits the wall on the 3rd step and gets confused. "Oh," Leo whispered, his eyes widening in sudden understanding. "So I have to change the 3 to a 2." "Exactly," Maya smiled. "Try it." Leo pressed his small finger against the screen, dragging a new number block into the sequence. He pressed the green execution symbol. On the screen, the small digital turtle walked forward 2 steps, turned right perfectly, and safely navigated the corner of the maze. Leo threw his arms up in the air in absolute triumph. "I did it. I coded it." "You did," Maya praised him, feeling a profound warmth expanding in her chest. "You are a natural engineer, Leo." What neither of them realized was that Liam Sterling was standing on the interior glass mezzanine 2 floors above them, looking directly down at their table. Liam had left a critical meeting regarding the public offering just to get a cup of coffee. But the sight of Maya and his son froze him completely in his tracks. He watched the way Maya leaned in, dedicating her entire, undivided attention to Leo. He saw his son laughing, his small face glowing with a pride Liam had not seen since his wife passed away. Liam placed his hands flat against the cold glass railing. His chest tightened painfully. He was a man who commanded thousands of employees, a man who moved hundreds of millions of dollars with a single signature. Yet he could not figure out how to make his own son look at him with that level of unfiltered happiness. He watched Maya wipe a smudge of chocolate from Leo's chin. She was brilliant, fiercely protective, and possessed a depth of empathy that Liam found completely staggering. He realized in that quiet afternoon moment that he was rapidly developing feelings for her that went far beyond professional respect. It terrified him. Down below, Leo looked up at Maya, his brown eyes perfectly serious. "Maya," Leo asked, his voice quiet. "Yes, Leo." "My dad is always working," Leo said, looking down at his tablet. "And Jenna's nice, but she is always typing on her machine. Can you be my permanent teacher? You can teach me how to build the robots." Maya felt a sudden prick of tears behind her eyes. She reached across the table and gently squeezed his small hand. "I would be deeply honored to be your teacher, Leo," Maya promised softly. "Whenever you need me, I am right upstairs." Liam watched the exchange from the balcony above. He swallowed hard, pushing away from the glass railing, carrying the weight of his own profound failures back into the boardroom. At exactly 6 p.m., the executive floor was nearly deserted. Most of the senior leadership had departed for expensive dinners to celebrate the impending public offering. Marcus Ashford was not celebrating. He was sitting in his darkened office, the only light radiating from the 3 massive monitors positioned perfectly on his mahogany desk. The door to his office was securely locked. The mechanical blinds were drawn tightly shut. Marcus picked up his personal mobile phone and initiated an encrypted voice call. He brought the device to his ear, taking a slow sip of an incredibly expensive aged scotch from a crystal tumbler. The line connected without a single greeting. "Richard," Marcus said, his voice low and laced with venom, "we have a severe complication regarding the timeline." On the other end of the secure connection, Richard, the chairman of the board of directors for Sterling Tech, let out a slow, measured breath. "I read the minutes from the morning meeting, Marcus," Richard replied, his voice possessing the rough, gravelly texture of a man accustomed to absolute power. "Liam humiliated you. He placed a common coffee vendor in charge of the entire security division. The board is incredibly disturbed by his erratic behavior. He is risking the public offering." "He is compromised," Marcus insisted, setting his crystal tumbler down onto a leather coaster. "He is thinking with his emotions, not his intellect. Maya Vance is a total liability. She has locked me out of the primary administrative directories." If she continues to dig into the network traffic from yesterday's lockdown, she is going to find the outbound data packet. A heavy, oppressive silence stretched across the secure cellular connection. If she finds that packet, Marcus, you will be facing federal prison, Richard warned smoothly. And I will not be standing beside you when the authorities arrive. We are moving $3 million of corporate assets into the offshore accounts to cover the venture capital losses. You assured me the ransomware distraction would obscure the transfer entirely. It did obscure it, Marcus argued defensively, his fingers tightening around his phone. The engineering team was completely blind, but Maya bypassed the graphical interface. She pulled the raw server logs. She has the technical capability to trace the offshore routing if she knows what to look for. Then you must ensure she does not look for it, Richard commanded coldly. You need to eliminate the threat, Marcus. Discredit her completely. Make Liam believe she is the enemy. Do whatever is necessary to protect the transfer. I will handle the board of directors on my end. The connection terminated, leaving Marcus alone in the heavy silence of his darkened office. Marcus placed his phone on the desk. He turned his attention back to his center monitor. His eyes narrowed, reflecting the harsh blue light of the screen. Maya had revoked his administrative privileges, but she did not realize that Marcus had spent 3 years building invisible back doors into the network architecture. He opened a hidden command terminal. His fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard, the keys depressing with a soft, precise resistance. He was not trying to regain control of the firewall. He was doing something far more insidious. He was accessing the central credential repository. Marcus typed a complex string of bypass commands, isolating Maya's newly created executive profile. He initiated a cloning sequence, holding his breath as the progress bar slowly filled across the screen. When the sequence completed, Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. He had successfully duplicated Maya Vance's unique user identification credentials. He possessed her digital fingerprint. He could now move freely through the Sterling Tech servers, export any file, authorize any transfer, and the unalterable system logs would record that Maya had done it. You want to play the hero, Maya, Marcus whispered to the empty room, raising his crystal tumbler in a mock toast to the glowing screen. Let us see how you handle being the villain. He swallowed the burning scotch, the seed of her destruction, firmly planted in the machine. The digital clock on the bottom right corner of Maya's secondary monitor changed from 11:59 p.m. to exactly midnight. The main engineering floor of Sterling Tech was entirely deserted, plunged into a heavy, artificial darkness. The only illumination came from the massive glass-walled server room at the far end of the floor and the 3 glowing screens on Maya's new executive desk. The ambient temperature had dropped significantly, the industrial cooling units working overtime to maintain the massive hardware banks. Maya rubbed her eyes, feeling the familiar abrasive burning sensation of looking at raw hexadecimal code for 6 consecutive hours. She was hunting for anomalies in the network traffic, looking for any trace of the hidden outbound data packet she had discovered earlier. The encryption Marcus had used was incredibly sophisticated, layered like a digital onion. The heavy glass security doors at the entrance of the floor parted. Maya did not turn around. She assumed it was the night patrol security guard making his scheduled rounds. She continued to type, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard with practiced, relentless speed. You are going to permanently damage your retinas if you do not turn on a desk lamp, a voice said from the shadows. Maya stopped typing. Her hands hovered over the keys. Liam Sterling walked into the pool of blue light, radiating from her monitors. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie hours ago. His crisp white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms and an incredibly expensive silver watch. In his left hand he carried two brown paper bags that radiated a deep, savory heat. "My retinas are perfectly conditioned for low-light environments, Mr. Sterling," Maya replied, leaning back in her ergonomic chair and crossing her arms. "I told you to call me Liam when we are alone," he corrected her, his voice possessing a dark, smooth texture that seemed to echo in the empty room. He placed the paper bags onto the edge of her desk. "And I brought you dinner. Spicy basil chicken from the Thai place on Lexington Avenue. Jenna mentioned it was your favorite." Maya looked at the bags. The rich aroma of chili, garlic, and fresh basil immediately flooded her senses, making her stomach contract sharply. She had not eaten since her salad at noon. "Jenna is an information broker disguised as an executive assistant," Maya observed, a tiny smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. She reached forward and pulled one of the warm containers toward her. "But I will accept the bribe." "Thank you." Liam pulled up a spare rolling chair and sat down right next to her. He was close. He was entirely too close. Maya could smell the distinct, sophisticated scent of bergamot, cedar, and clean cotton that clung to his skin. The physical proximity sent a sudden, electric jolt of awareness straight down her spine. "What are you working on?" Liam asked, leaning forward to look at her primary screen. "I am running a deep diagnostic on the administrative traffic logs from the morning of the hack," Maya explained, opening her plastic container of food. "I am trying to map the exact route the malware took through your internal firewall." "You prefer the company of machines to the company of people," Liam stated, opening his own container. It was not a question. It was a careful observation. "Machines are logical," Maya argued, using her fork to point at the cascading lines of code on her screen. "Code is an absolute truth. If you write a flawless command, the computer will execute it perfectly every single time. It does not lie to you. It does not possess a fragile ego. It does not hand you a corporate envelope when you save its life." Liam stopped eating. He turned his head slowly, looking at her profile in the dim blue light. "I apologized for the envelope," Liam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate volume. "You did," Maya conceded, turning her head to meet his gaze. "But the point remains. Humans are unpredictable variables. They represent an incredibly high risk of failure. Are you talking about my engineering team, or are you talking about yourself?" Liam challenged her, his dark eyes searching hers. "I am talking about the structural vulnerability of relying on other people," Maya said, her voice turning defensive. "When my parents died, I learned very quickly that the only person who was going to keep my sister alive was me. I do not have the luxury of unpredictable variables." Liam set his food down onto the desk. He leaned in closer, invading her personal space entirely. The air between them grew impossibly heavy, charged with a magnetic, overwhelming tension. Maya felt her heart begin to race, hammering violently against her ribs. "Not every variable is a threat, Maya," Liam whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. "Some variables are just waiting for you to let them into the equation." He reached out, his fingertips gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair away from her cheek. His touch was incredibly warm, sending a shock wave of sensation through her entire body. Maya stopped breathing. She felt the heavy, undeniable gravity pulling them together. She leaned in, closing her eyes, feeling the heat of his breath against her skin. A bright yellow warning banner flashed violently across her secondary monitor, accompanied by a sharp synthetic audio alert from the system diagnostic tool. Maya drew in a sudden, shaky breath, her eyes snapping open. The intense, fragile moment shattered instantly. Liam pulled back, clearing his throat, his face flushing with a sudden rush of color. "Your absolute truth is requesting your attention," Liam said, his voice incredibly tight. Maya turned back to the screen, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them back onto the keyboard. She had almost crossed a massive, irreversible line, and as she looked at the yellow warning banner, detailing a corrupted data file, she realized she was terrified. She was falling for the chief executive officer of Sterling Tech, and she had absolutely no idea how to write a code to stop it. The boutique on Fifth Avenue did not look like a retail store. It looked like a private art gallery. At 2 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, Maya stood in the center of a spacious, private fitting room. The floors were covered in thick, ivory wool carpeting. The air smelled of expensive rosewater and fresh orchids. Large gilded mirrors lined every single wall, reflecting the soft, flattering golden light radiating from the crystal chandeliers above. Maya wore her favorite faded denim jeans and a plain gray sweater. She felt completely, utterly out of place. Sitting on a circular velvet sofa behind her were Jenna and Clara. Jenna had arranged the entire afternoon, utilizing her supreme executive authority, to secure a private appointment at the most exclusive designer boutique in Manhattan. Maya had insisted on bringing Clara, pulling her sister out of their cramped Brooklyn apartment to experience a taste of the elite world. Clara was sipping a tall glass of sparkling water infused with cucumber, looking around the room with wide, absolute wonder. "I cannot believe we are sitting in a store that requires an appointment," Clara said, her pale cheeks flushed with excitement. "Maya, you have to try the red one, the one with the dramatic neckline." "I am not wearing the red one," Maya argued, crossing her arms protectively. "I am a security analyst, Clara. I am supposed to blend into the background. I am not supposed to look like a Hollywood actress walking a red carpet. You are attending a high society charity gala on the arm of a billionaire technology founder," Jenna corrected her, standing up and smoothing her flawless skirt. "You are not blending into anything tonight, Maya. Tonight is about demonstrating absolute power." A tall, elegant sales associate walked into the room carrying an armful of protective garment bags. She hung them carefully on a polished brass rack. "We pulled the selections requested by Mr. Sterling's office," the associate announced with a polite, practiced smile. Maya turned to Jenna, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Liam paid for this?" "Mr. Sterling authorized a corporate wardrobe budget for his new executive leadership team." Jenna lied smoothly, not breaking eye contact. "It is standard company policy. Now, stop arguing and put on the first dress." For the next 45 minutes, Maya endured a grueling parade of haute couture. She tried on a severe black gown that made her look like a wealthy widow. She tried on a silver sequin dress that felt like wearing a suit of medieval armor. She rejected all of them, the heavy knot of anxiety in her stomach growing tighter with every failure. "This is a mistake," Maya said, stepping out of a suffocating white silk dress. "I am pretending to be someone I am not. Marcus is going to take one look at me tonight and know that I am just the girl who used to make his coffee." Clara stood up from the velvet sofa. She walked over to the brass rack, her fingers tracing the protective bags until she stopped at the very last one. She unzipped the bag slowly, revealing the garment hidden inside. "Try this one," Clara said softly. Maya took the heavy fabric and retreated into the changing alcove. 5 minutes later she stepped out and walked toward the massive gilded mirror. The room went entirely silent. It was a floor-length gown made of deep, rich, emerald-green silk. It did not rely on heavy sequins or dramatic, exaggerated cuts. Its power was in its absolute flawless architecture. The fabric draped over her shoulders with elegant precision, cinching perfectly at her waist before flowing down to the floor like liquid glass. The dark emerald color created a striking, intense contrast with her dark hair and brought out the golden honeytones in her eyes. Maya stared at her own reflection. She did not recognize the woman looking back at her. The exhaustion, the fear, the endless years of struggling to pay medical bills, all of it was temporarily erased. She looked fierce. She looked untouchable. "Oh, Maya," Clara whispered, her voice thick with sudden emotion. She walked up behind Maya, looking at their shared reflection in the mirror. "You look incredibly beautiful." Jenna stepped forward, adjusting a tiny fold of silk near Maya's shoulder. "You look exactly like the woman who saved a $300 million company in under 3 minutes," Jenna stated, her voice possessing a fierce, proud edge. "Marcus Ashford is going to absolutely hate you tonight, and it is going to be glorious." Maya looked at her sister's proud, shining eyes, and then back at her own reflection. For the very first time since she had dropped out of college, she stopped apologizing for her own existence. She lifted her chin, her posture aligning perfectly with the exquisite structure of the dress. "I will take it," Maya said, her voice steady and commanding. The Grand Plaza Hotel was a monument to old New York wealth. At 8 p.m., the massive ballroom was a sea of moving colors and overwhelming opulence. Towering centerpieces of white orchids dominated the tables. A live string quartet filled the cavernous space with a sweeping classical arrangement that provided a sophisticated background to the overlapping voices of the city's most elite residents. Liam Sterling stood near the center of the room, holding a crystal flute of sparkling water. He wore a classic, tailored black tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He was currently trapped in a conversation with 3 major venture capital investors, nodding politely as they discussed the expected share price of his company's public offering. "The market projections are incredibly strong," Liam, an older investor, noted, adjusting his silk tie. "If your firewall holds, tomorrow will be a historic victory." "The firewall is flawless," Liam assured them, his voice projecting absolute confidence. "I have my best people monitoring the architecture as we speak." "Speaking of your people," another investor said, looking over Liam's shoulder toward the grand staircase at the entrance of the ballroom. "Who is that?" Liam turned around. The conversation around him faded into complete insignificance. The classical music seemed to drop away entirely. Maya was standing at the top of the grand staircase. She wore the deep emerald green silk gown. Her dark hair was swept up into an elegant, complicated style, exposing the delicate, graceful line of her neck. She did not wear a heavy diamond necklace or extravagant jewelry. The flawless architecture of the dress and the fierce, intelligent fire in her eyes were the only adornments she needed. She began to descend the wide, carpeted stairs. Liam felt the air physically leave his lungs. He had always known she was beautiful, even when she was covered in coffee dust and wearing a faded apron. But seeing her now, radiating absolute power and confidence, struck him with the force of a physical blow. He handed his crystal flute to a passing waiter without looking, completely abandoning the wealthy investors. He walked across the ballroom floor, meeting her precisely at the bottom of the staircase. "You look," Liam started, his voice uncharacteristically rough. He stopped, struggling to find a word that could adequately capture the moment. "You look devastating, Maya." Maya felt a rush of intense heat flood her cheeks. "Jenna is a very aggressive personal stylist. I was not allowed to refuse." "Remind me to double Jenna's annual bonus on Monday," Liam said, offering his arm. Maya placed her hand on his sleeve, feeling the solid, reassuring warmth of his muscle beneath the expensive wool. They began to walk through the crowded ballroom together. Heads turned, constantly. Wealthy executives and prominent technology journalists whispered to each other, desperately trying to identify the striking woman walking beside the famous billionaire. Enjoying the attention, Mr. Sterling, Maya teased, leaning slightly closer to him to be heard over the classical music. I am enjoying the fact that every single man in this room is currently wondering how I managed to convince you to attend with me. Liam replied smoothly, a rare, genuine smile illuminating his face. Their perfect moment was interrupted by a dark, familiar presence. Marcus Ashford stepped directly into their path. He wore a tuxedo that looked slightly too tight across the shoulders. He held a flute of expensive champagne, his eyes scanning Maya from head to toe with an expression of pure, concentrated malice. Liam Marcus greeted him, his voice dripping with false politeness. He turned his gaze to Maya and Miss Vance. I see we are allowing the lobby service staff to attend the formal corporate events now. How incredibly progressive of us. Maya felt the muscles in Liam's arm instantly turn to solid stone. He took a half-step forward, his entire posture shifting into a stance of dominant, aggressive protection. Before Liam could speak, Maya placed a firm, restraining hand on his wrist. She stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and the chief technology officer. I am here because I am the lead security analyst for this corporation, Marcus, Maya stated, her voice perfectly level, carrying the icy, sharp edge of a diamond cutting glass. And you are here because Liam is currently feeling generous. I suggest you enjoy the expensive champagne while you still have the necessary security clearance to walk through the front door. Marcus's face turned a violent shade of crimson. His jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his neck visibly strained. He opened his mouth to deliver a vicious response, but he found himself completely stripped of his usual authority. He looked at Liam, who was watching Maya, with an expression of absolute, unconcealed awe. Marcus turned abruptly and walked away, disappearing into the crowded ballroom. Liam looked down at Maya. The anger in his chest had been entirely replaced by a profound, overwhelming admiration. You really do not need me to protect you at all, do you? Liam asked softly. I have spent my entire life protecting myself, Maya answered, looking up into his dark eyes. The live string quartet transitioned into a slower, incredibly romantic waltz. The crystal flutes on the surrounding tables caught the light of the massive chandeliers above. Liam turned fully toward her. He offered his hand, his palm open and waiting. Then allow me to offer something else entirely, Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent a shiver racing down her spine. Dance with me, Maya. The music swelled, the string quartet playing a haunting, sweeping melody that seemed to command the entire ballroom. Maya placed her hand into Liam's waiting palm. His fingers closed around hers, warm and incredibly solid. He guided her seamlessly onto the polished hardwood floor, navigating the crowded room with the effortless grace of a man who was entirely used to leading. He placed his other hand flat against the small of her back, the heat of his touch radiating through the thin emerald silk of her gown. They began to move. Maya had never learned formal ballroom dancing, but Liam telegraphed every step with absolute precision, making it impossible for her to fail. They drifted past wealthy investors and curious journalists, stepping into a world that existed only for the two of them. You are very quiet, Maya, Liam noted, his voice a low vibration that she felt as much as she heard. Are you calculating the structural integrity of the dance floor? I am calculating the probability that I am currently dreaming, Maya admitted, looking up into his dark eyes. And I am trying to determine what will happen when the alarm clock finally rings. Liam's expression shifted, the playful amusement fading into something far more intense and deeply serious. He stopped moving. The music continued to play around them, but he guided her gently through the dancing couples, leading her toward a set of heavy glass doors at the edge of the ballroom. He pushed the doors open, ushering her out onto a wide, private stone balcony. The cold November air of Manhattan hit them instantly, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the crowded gala. The balcony overlooked the southern edge of Central Park, the sprawling canopy of trees completely dark against the glowing, electric grid of the city skyline. Maya shivered, crossing her bare arms against the sudden chill. Liam immediately removed his tailored tuxedo jacket. He stepped behind her and draped the heavy, warm wool over her shoulders. The fabric smelled intensely of bergamot and his unique, sophisticated cologne. "Thank you," Maya said, pulling the lapels of the jacket closer together. Liam stepped up beside her, resting his hands on the carved stone balustrade. He looked out at the glowing city for a long, silent moment. The overlapping voices from the ballroom were muted out here, replaced by the distant, relentless rhythm of city traffic. "I have spent the last 3 years of my life building walls," Liam confessed, his voice rough and stripped of all its corporate polish. "When my wife died, the grief was so massive it felt like it would crush my lungs entirely. I decided the only way to survive was to control absolutely everything. If I built the strongest company, if I wrote the perfect code, if I maintained absolute authority, I could prevent the world from taking anything else away from me." He turned his head to look at her, the golden light from the ballroom illuminating the harsh, beautiful angles of his face. "But control is an illusion," Liam continued, taking a slow step toward her. "I built a fortress, Maya, and I locked my own son outside of it. I was so terrified of failing him that I stopped trying to be a father entirely." Maya turned fully to face him. Her heart was beating with a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She saw the absolute vulnerability in his eyes, the raw, unprotected truth of a man who is finally tearing his own walls down. "You did not fail him, Liam," Maya said softly, reaching out from beneath the oversized tuxedo jacket. She placed her hand against his chest, feeling the rapid, strong beating of his heart through his crisp white shirt. "You just lost your way in the dark. But you are finding your way back." Liam looked down at her hand resting against his chest, and then up at her face. "I am terrified, Maya," Liam whispered, closing the remaining distance between them. "I am terrified of how much I care about you. You walked into my lobby wearing a green apron, and you completely rewrote the architecture of my entire life." Maya felt a sudden, sharp sting of tears behind her eyes. She had spent her entire life fighting to be seen, fighting to prove her worth, fighting to survive the crushing weight of her sister's medical debt. She had never allowed herself to rely on anyone else. "I am terrified, too," Maya admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I do not know how to be the person who leans on someone else. I only know how to be the person who fixes the code." "Then we will write a new code together," Liam stated softly. He raised his hands, his palms framing her face. His thumbs gently brushed across her cheekbones. Maya leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. Liam lowered his head. His lips met hers. It was not a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was an absolute, undeniable claim. The heat of his mouth melted the cold November air completely. Maya brought her hands up, tangling her fingers into the soft, dark hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. All the tension, all the professional boundaries, and all the unspoken words of the past week ignited in a single, breathless moment. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against each other. "You are going to freeze out here," Liam noted, his voice thick with emotion. "I am not cold at all," Maya replied, a radiant, genuine smile breaking across her face. The transition from a fairy-tale evening in a silk gown back to the harsh, fluorescent reality of corporate America was always going to be jarring. At exactly 8 a.m. on Monday morning, The private executive elevator began its smooth, silent ascent to the top floor of Sterling Tech. Maya stood in the back corner of the small, mirrored compartment. She wore a sharp charcoal blazer and crisp trousers, holding a standard paper cup of coffee. Standing exactly 3 feet away from her was Liam. He wore a dark navy suit, holding a leather portfolio. Standing directly between them was Jenna, holding her digital tablet and staring straight ahead at the metal doors. The silence in the elevator was incredibly thick. It was not a hostile silence. It was a silence vibrating with suppressed electric tension. Every time the elevator passed a floor, the subtle shift in gravity caused Liam and Maya to steal quick, sideways glances at each other. "So," Jenna announced, not turning her head, her voice completely deadpan, "did either of you enjoy the charity gala this weekend?" Maya nearly choked on her coffee. She swallowed hard, gripping the paper cup. "The gala was highly productive," Liam answered, his voice possessing a smooth, professional cadence that completely failed to hide the amusement dancing in his eyes. "We secured several major commitments for the public offering." "I see," Jenna said, tapping her digital stylus against her tablet. "And, Miss Vance, did you find the networking opportunities satisfactory?" "The networking was entirely unexpected," Maya replied, staring intensely at the floor indicator numbers above the door to avoid looking at Liam. "But I believe I established a very solid working relationship with the executive team." "A solid working relationship," Jenner repeated flatly. "That explains why the chief executive officer arrived this morning, smelling faintly of the expensive floral perfume you purchased on Saturday afternoon." Maya felt her face instantly flush with intense, burning heat. Liam let out a short, genuine laugh, completely breaking his professional facade. "You are entirely too observant, Jenna. It is becoming a security risk." "My observational skills are the reason this company functions, Mr. Sterling," Jenna countered, finally turning around to face them both with a brilliant, triumphant smile. "For the record, I think it is about time you both updated your operational parameters. But I would suggest maintaining a respectful distance during the morning board briefing. Marcus is currently prowling the engineering floor, looking for a reason to burn the building down." The elevator reached the top floor, the metal doors sliding apart smoothly to reveal the executive reception area. Before Jenna could step out, Liam reached across the small space and quickly, deliberately brushed his fingers against the back of Maya's hand. It was a fleeting, invisible gesture, but it sent a rush of pure adrenaline straight through her veins. "I will see you in the briefing room, Miss Vance," Liam said, stepping out of the elevator. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Maya replied, hiding a massive smile behind her paper coffee cup. As Maya walked toward her new office, she noticed a small figure sitting on the leather sofa in the reception area. Leo was swinging his legs, holding a large, colorful box of building blocks. "Maya," Leo cheered, jumping off the sofa and running toward her. "Good morning, lead designer," Maya greeted him, kneeling down to his eye level. "What are you doing at the office so early?" "My school is closed today for a teacher meeting," Leo explained, holding up the box of blocks. "Jenna said I have to sit quietly, but I wanted to show you my new project. I am building a server farm." "A server farm is a very ambitious project for a Monday," Maya laughed, standing up and taking his small hand. "Why do you not bring your blocks into my office? You can engineer the servers while I audit the network logs." Leo's eyes widened with pure delight. He grabbed his box and followed her down the hall, effectively cementing Maya's absolute favorite start to a work week she had ever experienced. By 1 p.m., the Sterling Tech Executive Cafeteria was a chaotic symphony of overlapping conversations. The clinking of heavy silverware and the rich scent of roasted chicken and artisan salads Maya carried a tray holding a simple grilled chicken salad and a bottle of sparkling water. She navigated through the sea of perfectly tailored suits, her eyes scanning the room. She spotted Liam sitting at a corner booth by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Leah was sitting directly beside him, intensely focused on assembling a tower of plastic building blocks on the edge of the table. Maya approached the booth, feeling the familiar pleasant flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Is this seat taken by any major investors?" Maya asked, gesturing to the empty space across from Liam. Liam looked up from his digital phone. The harsh, commanding lines of his face instantly softened. "That seat is permanently reserved for the lead security analyst." Maya sat down, placing her tray on the table. For the next 20 minutes, the three of them ate in a comfortable, domestic rhythm. Liam asked Maya about her progress on the network audit. Maya explained the complexities of the encrypted files she was untangling. Leo occasionally interrupted to demand structural advice for his plastic tower. It felt entirely, wonderfully normal. It felt like a family. 2 tables away, several senior marketing executives were stealing obvious, lingering glances at the corner booth. The rumors regarding the charity gala had spread through the corporate grapevine faster than a computer virus. The sight of the ruthless CEO sharing a casual lunch with his son and the former barista was the most scandalous event the company had witnessed in a decade. Leo reached for a potato chip from his father's plate, his small hand knocking over a stack of his building blocks. They scattered across the table. "Leo," Liam warned gently, helping the boy gather the pieces. "You need to build a stronger foundation if you want the tower to reach the ceiling." Leo ignored the architectural advice. He looked directly at Maya, his large brown eyes unblinking and entirely serious. "Maya," Leo said, his voice carrying clearly over the ambient noise of the cafeteria. "Tommy from my school told me a secret about adults." "Oh," Maya asked, taking a sip of her sparkling water. "Tommy seems to possess a lot of highly classified information." "What did he say?" "He said that when a man looks at a woman the way my dad looks at you, they usually get married," Leo announced loudly. Maya choked on her sparkling water. She coughed into her paper napkin, her face turning a violent, immediate shade of crimson. At the tables surrounding their booth, the overlapping conversations suddenly stopped. The silence rippled outward like a stone dropped into a calm pond, until nearly a quarter of the cafeteria was completely uncomfortably quiet, blatantly listening to the exchange. Liam froze a French fry halfway to his mouth. He looked at his son, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and profound amusement. "Leo," Liam said, his voice tight with suppressed panic, "that is an inappropriate topic for the corporate dining facility." "Why?" Leo asked innocently, entirely immune to the social disaster he had just triggered. "Do you not want to marry her? You always smile when you look at her phone messages. You never smile when Marcus sends you a message." Maya wanted the polished hardwood floor of the cafeteria to open up and swallow her completely. She prepared herself for the inevitable corporate denial. She waited for Liam to calmly explain to his son that their relationship was strictly professional, maintaining his impenetrable executive boundaries in front of his employees. Instead, Liam set his food down. He did not look embarrassed. He did not look angry. He looked across the table, his dark eyes locking onto Maya's with an intensity that made the rest of the crowded room fade into absolute nothingness. Liam reached across the table. He did not care who was watching. He gently, deliberately covered Maya's hand with his own, his warm fingers intertwining with hers in full view of the senior marketing team. "Tommy from your school is an incredibly smart child, Leo," Liam said, his voice smooth, steady, and loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear clearly. And if I am incredibly lucky, maybe one day I will get the chance to ask her. The cafeteria seemed to collectively stop breathing. Maya felt her heart execute a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. He was not hiding. He was not protecting his corporate image. In front of the entire company, Liam Sterling was publicly claiming her. He was choosing her over his fortress. Maya turned her hand over, lacing her fingers securely through his, offering him a radiant, fearless smile. "I think your tower needs a wider base, Leo," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly with pure joy. "I will help you build it after lunch." Leo cheered, entirely satisfied with the outcome, and returned to his plastic blocks. But standing in the doorway of the cafeteria, holding a cup of black coffee, was Marcus Ashford. He watched the exchange with a cold, venomous expression. His fingers tightened around his paper cup until the cardboard buckled and hot liquid spilled over his knuckles. He did not flinch. He turned and walked back toward the engineering floor, ready to execute the sequence that would burn Maya Vance's entire life to the ground. At exactly 4 p.m., the absolute high of the cafeteria incident still lingered in Maya's chest, a warm, steady rhythm that made the complex network audit feel entirely effortless. She sat in her new executive office, staring at her 3 primary monitors. The afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long geometric shadows across her desk. She took a sip of her sparkling water, pulling up the decrypted traffic logs from Marcus Ashford's restricted folders. She had been filtering the data for 3 hours, looking for the destination of the outbound packet she had discovered earlier. Suddenly, her secondary monitor flashed. It was not a synthetic audio alert or a warning banner. It was a massive, silent spike in the real-time data flow. A solid green bar on her network diagnostic graph shot upward, indicating an astronomical volume of data moving across the server. Maya set her water down. Her hands flew to her keyboard. "What are you doing?" Maya whispered to the empty room, her eyes darting across the raw hexadecimal code flooding the screen. Someone was initiating a massive, unauthorized data transfer. They were bypassing the secondary firewall entirely, routing directly through the core user database. 3 million user profiles, including encrypted passwords, financial records, and private corporate emails, were being compressed and packaged for external export. It was a catastrophic breach. If this data left the building, the company would not just lose its public offering. It would face federal prosecution. "Not today," Maya stated, her voice hardening into pure, concentrated focus. She opened her root command terminal, her fingers moving with relentless, punishing speed. She typed the absolute override command, intending to sever the external connection entirely, exactly as she had done during the ransomware attack. She struck the Enter key with forceful authority. The screen turned solid red. Access denied. Administrative privileges revoked. Maya felt the blood drain completely from her face. A cold, heavy knot of pure dread formed in her stomach. She tried another sequence, utilizing a hidden back door she had coded herself the previous night. Access denied. "Impossible," Maya breathed, her hands trembling as she struck the keys harder. "I am the lead security analyst. I have absolute root control." She opened the identity verification log, desperately trying to trace the digital fingerprint of the user who was locking her out of her own network. The server query processed for 3 agonizing seconds. The result appeared in bold, unyielding white text in the center of her red monitor. "Export authorized by M. Vance." Maya stared at her own name. The system did not just lock her out. The system believed she was the one executing the theft. Before she could process the sheer, terrifying magnitude of the frame-up, the heavy oak door of her office swung open with a violent force. At exactly 4:30 p.m., the atmosphere on the executive floor shattered. Marcus Ashford marched into Maya's office. He did not look angry. He looked triumphant, his face wearing a mask of supreme, calculated outrage. Flanking him on either side were four large men wearing the dark, structured uniforms of Sterling Tech corporate security. "Step away from the terminal, Miss Vance," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying clearly into the quiet hallway where several assistants had stopped to watch. Maya stood up slowly from her ergonomic chair. She did not raise her hands, but she stepped back, creating physical distance between herself and the glowing monitors. "Someone is exporting the user database," Maya said, her voice tight but remarkably steady. "Marcus, the network is bleeding 3 million records. We have to physically disconnect the main server rack right now." "We do not have to do anything," Marcus replied, stepping forward and gesturing to the security guards. "Secure her laptop. Do not let her touch another keyboard in this building." Two of the large security guards moved rapidly around the desk. One of them physically unplugged her silver laptop, closing the lid and pulling it away. "What are you doing?" Maya demanded, a sharp edge of genuine panic finally breaking through her professional exterior. "If you do not stop the transfer, the public offering is completely dead." Marcus stopped directly in front of her. The cruel, victorious smile he had been suppressing finally broke across his face. "The transfer is already complete, Maya," Marcus said smoothly, lowering his voice so only she could hear the absolute venom in his words. "The financial press received an anonymous tip 10 minutes ago. The news of the data breach just hit the terminal networks. Sterling Tech stock is plummeting before the market even opens tomorrow. You just cost Liam $300 million. Maya felt as though all the oxygen had been physically vacuumed from the room. The pieces of the trap rapidly aligned in her mind. The cloned credentials. The perfectly timed distraction. Marcus had not just stolen the data. He had burned the entire house down to cover his tracks, and he was leaving her standing in the center of the flames holding the match. "You used my credentials," Maya stated, her eyes locking onto his with fierce, burning hatred. "You cloned my administrative profile." "That sounds exactly like the desperate excuse of a corporate spy who just got caught selling proprietary data," Marcus countered, turning his back to her and addressing the guards. "Escort Miss Vance to the executive boardroom. The chairman of the board is waiting." "I am not going anywhere until I speak to Liam," Maya refused, planting her feet firmly onto the carpet. "Mr. Sterling is already in the boardroom," Marcus said, looking over his shoulder. "He is currently reviewing the flawless, undeniable proof of your absolute betrayal. Walk, Miss Vance, or security will physically carry you." Surrounded by the heavy, intimidating presence of the guards, Maya walked out of her office. The hallway was lined with staring employees. Jenna stood near the reception desk, her hands covering her mouth in silent horror. Maya kept her chin elevated, refusing to look like a victim as she marched toward the execution chamber. At exactly 5 p.m., the executive boardroom felt like a tomb. The long glass table was surrounded by the entire board of directors, their faces drawn tight with anxiety and rage. At the far end of the table sat Richard, the chairman of the board, an imposing man with silver hair and an expression of pure granite. Liam Sterling sat to Richard's right. He looked incredibly pale, the sharp, authoritative lines of his face taut with intense, suppressed agony. He did not look at Maya when the security guards escorted her into the room. He stared straight ahead at the massive projection screen. "Take a seat, Miss Vance," Richard commanded, his rough voice completely devoid of any pleasantries. Maya sat in the empty leather chair, at the opposite end of the long table. She was completely isolated. Marcus walked to the front of the room, connecting his own tablet to the presentation system. The massive screen illuminated, displaying a highly detailed map of network traffic accompanied by a cascading list of unalterable system logs. 45 minutes ago, our secondary servers suffered a catastrophic data hemorrhage. Marcus presented to the board, his voice possessing the grave, serious tone of a loyal soldier reporting a tragedy. 3 million encrypted user records were exported to an untraceable external server. The financial press is already broadcasting the story. Our valuation is in freefall. The board members began shouting over one another, demanding accountability, demanding legal action. Richard held up a single hand, and the room instantly silenced. "How did this happen, Marcus?" Richard asked, playing his part in the theatrical performance perfectly. "I thought we patched the vulnerabilities." "We did, Richard," Marcus answered, pressing a button to advance his slide. The firewall did not fail. The data was handed over willingly. I traced the origin of the export command. The screen changed. It displayed a massive, high-resolution image of the credential log, user, M. Vance, clearance, executive root, action, export authorized. Maya stood up, placing her hands flat against the cool glass of the table. "That is a complete fabrication. The system logs can be manipulated if someone possesses the original architecture keys." Marcus cloned my profile. The system logs are encrypted on a closed loop-block architecture. Marcus countered immediately, looking directly at the board members. "They cannot be altered retroactively. Not by me, not by Liam, not by anyone. The command came from her specific terminal, using her specific biometric clearance, at precisely 3:45 p.m. She sold the data to our leading competitor to sabotage the public offering." Maya turned her gaze toward the only person in the room who mattered. "Liam," Maya said, her voice carrying a raw, desperate honesty, "you know I did not do this. You know exactly what Marcus is capable of. Please look at me." Liam slowly turned his head. His dark eyes met hers, and Maya felt her heart shatter completely. He was drowning. The board was watching him. The investors were watching him. His entire life's work, the fortress he had built to protect his son's future, was crumbling around him in real time. If he defended her without physical proof, the board would immediately vote to remove him as chief executive officer for gross negligence. He had to choose between the woman he was falling in love with and the empire he had sworn to protect. "The digital evidence is tied to your specific account, Maya," Liam said, his voice sounding hollow, as if the words were being painfully extracted from his throat. "Digital evidence can be faked," Maya argued, her voice rising in volume, fighting against the suffocating weight of the room. "Human character cannot. You know who I am, Liam." "We know exactly who you are," Richard interrupted, his voice laced with absolute disgust. "You are a college dropout who manipulated an emotionally compromised executive into giving you the keys to a billion-dollar company. You are a profound liability, and your employment is terminated." Maya did not look at Richard. She kept her eyes locked entirely on Liam. She waited for him to stand up. She waited for him to slam his hands on the table, to declare that he trusted her, to fight for the future they had just begun to write together. Liam looked down at the polished glass table, his jaw clenched so tightly, the muscle visibly strained. He did not say a word. At 5:15 p.m., the crushing silence in the boardroom was finally broken. "Mr. Sterling," Richard prompted, his voice carrying the sharp weight of an absolute ultimatum. "As the chief executive officer, the board requires your formal agreement on the immediate termination of Miss Vance, pending a full federal criminal investigation." Liam closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The weight of the entire world rested squarely on his shoulders. He thought about Leo. He thought about the thousands of employees who relied on this company for their survival. He thought about the kiss on the balcony, the taste of the cold November air, the feeling of Maya's hand intertwined with his in the cafeteria just 4 hours ago. He opened his eyes. The warmth was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, dead emptiness. "The evidence is conclusive," Liam stated, his voice completely devoid of any emotional resonance. "Miss Vance, your employment with Sterling Tech is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your office to pack your personal belongings, and then you will be removed from the premises." Maya felt as though she had been physically struck. The air vanished from her lungs, leaving her entirely breathless. The betrayal was absolute. It was not the loss of the job or the threat of a federal investigation that broke her heart. It was the fact that when the walls started closing in, Liam Sterling had retreated back into his fortress, leaving her outside to face the wolves entirely alone. Marcus offered a discreet, satisfied nod to Richard. Maya slowly stood up straight. She did not cry. She refused to give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her break. She pulled her shoulders back, adopting the fierce, untouchable posture she had worn in the emerald silk gown. She looked directly at Liam, her golden honey eyes completely devoid of the warmth she had offered him earlier that day. "You built a truly beautiful fortress, Mr. Sterling," Maya said, her voice dropping to a low, icy register that commanded the absolute attention of every man in the room. "But you are going to be completely, utterly alone inside it." She turned away from the table, not waiting for the security guards to escort her. She walked toward the heavy oak doors, her head held high, her footsteps echoing with steady, unbroken rhythm against the hardwood floor. Liam watched her go. As the doors closed smoothly behind her, severing their connection completely, he felt a massive, vital piece of his own soul tear away. He had saved his company, but he knew with absolute certainty that he had just lost the only thing that actually mattered. At exactly 5:30 p.m., Maya Vance stood in the center of her new executive office, pulling a flat, brown cardboard box entirely open. She folded the bottom flaps inward, securing them with a strip of clear packing tape. Two large security guards stood just outside her open door, their hands folded rigidly in front of them, their expressions entirely blank. They were waiting to escort her out of the building like a common criminal. Maya did not shed a single tear. The initial shock of Liam's betrayal had completely burned away, leaving behind a cold, fiercely focused anger. She began placing her few personal items into the box. A spare blazer, her collection of specialized stylus pens, the small, resilient, succulent plant Jenna had placed on her desk on her very first day upstairs. The heavy glass door was pushed open further. Jenna stepped into the office. The flawlessly composed executive assistant was gone. Her eyes were red, her breathing uneven, and her hands were curled into tight, trembling fists at her sides. "They are lying," Jenna stated, her voice thick with raw emotion, completely ignoring the security guards in the hallway. "Marcus is lying to the board. Maya, you did not sell the data." "I know you did not." Maya paused, holding her leather-bound notebook in her hands. She looked at Jenna, feeling a sudden, intense wave of gratitude for the only person in this massive fortress who still believed in her. "I know," Maya said softly, placing the notebook carefully into the cardboard box. "Marcus cloned my administrative credentials. He initiated the export sequence and framed me so he could steal the data without consequence. It was a brilliant, highly coordinated attack." "Then we go to the authorities," Jenna urged, stepping closer and lowering her voice. "We bypass the board of directors completely. We call the federal regulators. I will testify that Marcus has been acting erratically. Testimony is entirely useless against digital system logs, Jenna. Maya corrected her gently. In a courtroom, the hexadecimal code is the absolute truth. Marcus encrypted the logs to make it look like my specific terminal authorized the transfer. The authorities will look at the digital footprint, and they will arrest me. Liam knew that. That is why he did not fight the board. Jenna let out a long, shaky breath. Mr. Sterling is a coward. He chose his valuation over the truth. He chose his son's future over a woman he barely knows, Maya replied, her voice remaining perfectly steady despite the sharp ache in her chest. It is the logical equation. I cannot blame him for executing it. Maya turned her attention to the large physical network topology map pinned to the corkboard on her wall. She had printed it yesterday to study the physical layout of the Sterling Tech server infrastructure. Her eyes traced the complex web of red and blue lines, mapping the connections between the primary servers, the secondary firewalls, and the auxiliary backup nodes. Marcus had manipulated the digital logs, but Maya knew that the digital logs were not the only record. Every single packet of data that left the Sterling Tech building was routed through a physical analog fiber optic switch located in the utility hallway, completely separate from the digital firewall. It was an antiquated piece of hardware that Marcus, in his arrogance, had deemed obsolete. It recorded the raw, unfiltered physical origin of every network request onto a solid-state auxiliary drive. Marcus had altered the software, but he had forgotten about the hardware. Jenna, Maya said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. She turned away from the map and looked directly into the assistant's eyes. I need a distraction, a very loud, very messy distraction in the eastern server hallway. Can you do that? Jenna looked at her, the sadness in her eyes instantly replaced by a sharp, calculating, fierce loyalty. I am an executive assistant, Maya, Jenna replied, her posture straightening. Creating orchestrated chaos is listed in my primary job description. Give me exactly 3 minutes. Jenna turned and marched out of the office, brushing past the security guards with purposeful, aggressive strides. Maya picked up her cardboard box. The weight of it was minimal, but it felt incredibly heavy. She walked toward the door, nodding to the security personnel. I am ready to leave, Maya announced. At 5:45 p.m., the eastern server hallway was normally a quiet, sterile corridor used only by maintenance technicians. Maya walked slowly down the center of the hallway, carrying her cardboard box. A security guard walked exactly 2 paces behind her left shoulder, and another walked 2 paces behind her right. They were approaching the primary intersection that led to the executive elevators. Directly ahead of them, a massive wheeled catering cart was rolling rapidly down the intersecting corridor. It was stacked dangerously high with porcelain coffee urns, crystal water pitchers, and silver serving trays, remnants from the board meeting. Pushing the cart with frantic, poorly coordinated energy was Jenna. "Watch out!" Jenna yelled, her voice echoing loudly against the polished stone walls. She shoved the heavy cart directly into the intersection. The wheels caught violently on the metal transition strip of the flooring. The entire cart tipped sideways. The resulting collision was spectacular. Porcelain shattered across the floor in a massive wave of destruction. Gallons of dark coffee and iced water flooded across the polished stone. Silver trays spun rapidly across the tiles, creating a chaotic, overwhelming visual and auditory distraction. "Oh, my goodness!" Jenna cried out, dropping to her knees in the center of the disaster, waving her hands frantically. "The hot water! It is burning me. Please, I need assistance." Both security guards instinctively rushed forward to help the executive assistant, leaving Maya's side for exactly 10 seconds. It was all the time she needed. Maya dropped her cardboard box entirely. She dropped to her knees, sliding across the dry portion of the floor toward the recessed utility panel built into the lower section of the wall. This was the auxiliary fiber optic switch node. She did not have a key. She reached into her pocket and produced the specialized titanium-tipped stylus pen she had packed in her box just moments before. She jammed the tip into the simple magnetic lock mechanism of the utility panel and twisted her wrist with aggressive force. The panel gave way. Maya reached inside the dark, dusty cavity. Her fingers searched frantically over the heavy, braided cables until they brushed against the smooth, cold aluminum casing of the solid-state auxiliary drive. She gripped it tightly and pulled. It disconnected from the port with a firm resistance. She shoved the drive deep into the pocket of her trousers. She crawled backward, returning to her fallen cardboard box, just as the security guards realized she was no longer standing between them. "Miss Vance," the lead guard shouted, stepping away from the puddle of coffee. "Step away from the wall." "I am just gathering my belongings," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly as she placed her succulent plant back into the box. She stood up, brushing dust from her knees, her heart executing a violent rhythm in her chest. Jenna was still kneeling on the floor, surrounded by broken porcelain, offering Maya a brilliant, completely concealed look of triumph. "Keep moving," the guard ordered, placing a heavy hand on Maya's shoulder and directing her toward the service elevators. As the metal doors of the elevator closed, taking Maya down to the street level, she looked up toward the interior glass balcony of the executive floor. Marcus Ashford was standing there, looking down at her. He held a crystal tumbler in his hand, his posture radiating absolute, undisputed victory. He thought he had destroyed her. He thought he had won the war without suffering a single casualty. Maya placed her hand over her pocket, feeling the solid, rectangular shape of the auxiliary drive. She did not look away from him as the elevator doors sealed shut. The sky over Brooklyn was entirely pitch black, but apartment 3B was illuminated by the harsh, blinding glow of 3 interconnected computer monitors. At exactly midnight, Maya sat cross-legged on the faded yellow couch, her silver laptop resting on her knees, connected to the stolen solid-state drive via a complex array of adapter cables. The ambient temperature in the apartment was freezing, but Maya was sweating. Clara walked out of the tiny kitchenette, carrying 2 oversized ceramic mugs. The bitter, robust scent of dark roast coffee filled the small living space. She handed one mug to Maya and sat down on the edge of the coffee table, wrapping her thick wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. "How is the encryption looking?" Clara asked, her voice hushed, fully aware of the massive federal crime her sister had just committed by stealing corporate hardware. "It is a completely raw data stream," Maya explained, not taking her eyes off the cascading lines of hexadecimal code flooding her primary monitor. Marcus altered the graphical user interface, but this drive recorded the pure, unfiltered physical network requests. "I am building a custom decryption key to translate the raw binary back into readable traffic logs." "Can you find the actual destination of the data?" Clara asked, taking a careful sip of her coffee. "I have to," Maya stated, her fingers flying across the keyboard, executing commands at a punishing, relentless speed. Marcus used a proxy server to bounce the signal across 12 different international borders. He masked the true Internet Protocol address. But every single digital jump leaves a microscopic footprint. I just have to trace the footprints backward. For the next 5 hours the apartment was completely silent except for the rapid, mechanical striking of keys. Maya drank 3 cups of black coffee. Her eyes burned with a fierce, abrasive exhaustion. Her shoulders ached from holding the rigid posture, but she did not stop. She fought through the complex layers of proxy servers, peeling back the digital defenses Marcus had established. She was no longer fighting for her job. She was fighting for her absolute dignity. She was fighting to prove to Liam Sterling that he had made the most profound mistake of his entire life. At exactly 5:45 a.m., the sky outside the small alleyway window began to turn a bruised, muted shade of purple. Maya struck the enter key one final time. The rapid scrolling of code on the screen suddenly halted. "I broke the proxy chain," Maya whispered, leaning forward so closely her nose almost touched the glass of the monitor. The screen displayed a single, stable Internet protocol address. It was not a competitor's server. It was a private, highly secured offshore banking portal located in the Cayman Islands. He did not sell the user data, Maya realized, her voice filled with absolute staggering clarity. The data breach was a massive, highly coordinated smokescreen. He used the panic of the user records to authorize an outbound financial transfer from the corporate treasury. She ran a secondary query, matching the destination address with the physical hardware logs from the auxiliary drive. The result illuminated the dark room. The transfer had been executed from a physical mobile device, utilizing the internal wireless network of the Sterling Tech executive floor. The hardware identification number matched Marcus Ashford's personal corporate cellular phone perfectly. "Got you?" Maya breathed, a fierce, unapologetic smile spreading across her exhausted face. "Did you find the proof?" Clara asked, sitting up straight. "I found the digital equivalent of a smoking gun," Maya confirmed, hitting the print command on her keyboard. The small, inexpensive laser printer in the corner of the room roared to life, churning out 10 pages of undeniable, heavily documented evidence. Maya gathered the warm papers, sliding them carefully into a thick manila folder. She closed her silver laptop and stood up, stretching her aching muscles. The morning light was finally breaking over the Brooklyn skyline. "Maya," Clara said, looking at her sister with a mixture of immense pride and deep concern, "what are you going to do now?" Maya walked over to the broken brass hook near the door. She grabbed her favorite, well-worn leather jacket. She did not reach for the tailored navy blazer. She did not reach for the green barista apron. She was done wearing uniforms designed to make other people feel comfortable. "I am going to crash a party," Maya said, slipping her arms into the leather sleeves. At exactly 8 a.m., the Sterling Tech executive boardroom smelled of expensive, catered breakfast pastries, freshly pressed Italian espresso, and absolute undisputed victory. The company was exactly 1 hour away from formally launching its public offering on the major financial exchange. Despite the massive public relations nightmare caused by the data breach the previous afternoon, the board of directors had utilized their vast media connections to spin the narrative. They announced that a rogue employee had been immediately neutralized and the firewall had been completely fortified. The investors were satisfied. The share price was holding steady. The empire was secure. Richard, the chairman of the board, stood near the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a crystal glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. He was engaged in a quiet, congratulatory conversation with Marcus Ashford. Marcus wore a flawless, custom-tailored gray suit. His posture radiated supreme confidence. He had executed the perfect crime. He possessed $3 million in an untraceable offshore account. He had successfully eliminated the only person capable of discovering his theft, and he was currently being hailed by the board as the savior of the corporation. Sitting at the very head of the long glass table, entirely isolated from the celebration, was Liam Sterling. He wore a dark suit, his tie knotted perfectly at his throat. But he looked like a man attending a funeral. He stared blankly at the polished surface of the table. He had everything he had ever wanted. The fortress was impenetrable. His son's financial future was guaranteed for the next 10 generations. But as Liam looked at his own hands, he felt a crushing, hollow emptiness in his chest. He remembered the feeling of Maya's hand resting against his heart on the balcony. He remembered the fierce, unapologetic brilliance in her golden honey eyes when she told him he was losing his way. He had chosen the fortress, and Maya had been entirely correct. He was completely, utterly alone inside it. "Ah, smile, Liam," Richard commanded gently, walking over and placing a heavy hand on the CEO's shoulder. "In 60 minutes you are going to be one of the wealthiest men in the technology sector. The crisis has been averted." Marcus handled the situation perfectly. Liam looked up slowly, his dark eyes meeting Marcus's gaze. Marcus offered a smooth, practiced smile of deference, raising his coffee cup in a silent toast. Liam felt a sudden, intense wave of physical nausea. Before Liam could force himself to offer a reply, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom were pushed open with such extreme, violent force that they struck the interior walls, the impact echoing like a physical blow across the entire room. The quiet conversations ceased instantly. The board members turned around, their expressions registering absolute shock. Maya Vance walked into the room. She was not escorted by security guards. She wore her faded leather jacket, dark denim jeans, and boots. She carried her sleek silver laptop under one arm and a thick manila folder in her hand. She did not look like an employee, and she certainly did not look like a victim. She looked like a general arriving to demand a total surrender. "Security!" Richard bellowed, his face instantly turning a dark shade of crimson. He reached for the emergency communication panel on the wall. How did this woman breach the executive floor? "I borrowed Jenna's security clearance badge," Maya announced, her voice projecting with absolute, unwavering authority across the long room. She walked directly toward the head of the table. "And before you press that button, Richard, I highly suggest you sit down and look at the screen." Marcus stepped forward, moving to block her path to the presentation podium. His smooth, practiced composure completely vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, desperate panic. "You are trespassing," Marcus shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You have absolutely no right to be in this building. I am not an employee of this corporation any more." "Marcus," Maya replied, not slowing her stride. She walked directly up to him, her eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity. "Which means you possess absolutely no authority to fire me. Move out of my way." She did not wait for him to step aside. Maya shoved her shoulder hard against his chest, physically displacing him. She reached the podium and slammed her silver laptop onto the surface, connecting the display cable with a rapid, fluid motion. Liam stood up from his chair. His heart was executing a frantic, massive rhythm against his ribs. He looked at Maya, taking in the fierce, unyielding fire radiating from her entirely. She had come back. "Maya," Liam breathed, his voice barely audible over the rising chaos of the boardroom. Maya did not look at him. She opened her laptop and struck the enter key. The massive projection screen illuminated, completely overwhelming the room. It did not display a complex network graph or encrypted system logs. It displayed a massive, highly detailed banking ledger, stamped with the official seal of a Cayman Islands financial institution. "Yesterday afternoon, someone authorized a massive data export using my administrative credentials. Maya addressed the entire room, her voice slicing through the arguments and forcing absolute silence. But the user data was entirely worthless. It was a highly coordinated distraction. She advanced the slide. A new document appeared, highlighting a specific, massive numerical value. While you were panicking about the public relations disaster of exposed passwords, Maya continued, her voice ringing clear and strong, someone utilized the internal executive network to authorize a direct transfer of $3 million from the corporate venture capital treasury into this specific offshore account. The board members stared at the screen, the collective realization crashing over them like a wave of ice water. Richard lowered his hand from the security panel, his face turning incredibly pale. Marcus masked the digital origin of the transfer using a 12-layer proxy chain, Meyer explained, turning her body to face the chief technology officer directly. But he forgot that physical hardware possesses a permanent, unalterable digital footprint. She pressed one final key. The screen transitioned to a split image. On the left was the hardware identification number, extracted from the auxiliary drive. On the right was the registered corporate device registry for Sterling Tech executives. The numbers matched perfectly. Marcus Ashford executed the transfer using his personal mobile device while standing in his own office. Maya declared, her words falling like physical blows in the silent room. He orchestrated the hack, he stole your money, and he utilized my profile to frame me so he could walk away as the hero of the public offering. Marcus stumbled backward, his shoulders hitting the glass wall of the boardroom. He looked wildly around the room, searching for an escape route, searching for an ally. "This is manipulated," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking entirely. "Richard, she fabricated the hardware logs. You know, I would never do this." Richard looked at Marcus, his eyes cold and completely unforgiving. The chairman of the board recognized an absolute defeat when he saw one. He slowly reached forward and pressed the security communication panel. "Send the federal authorities up to the boardroom immediately," Richard commanded into the speaker. "We have an executive holding for extreme corporate embezzlement." Liam Sterling stepped away from the head of the table. He did not look at Richard, and he did not look at Marcus. He walked directly toward the presentation podium. He stopped exactly 3 feet away from Maya. He looked at the undeniable, flawless proof she had projected onto the screen. He looked at the exhaustion bruising the skin beneath her eyes and the fierce, incredible resilience radiating from her posture. She had not waited for him to save her. She had built her own armor, and she had fought her own war entirely alone. "Maya," Liam said, his voice raw, stripped of every single defense he had ever possessed. "I am so deeply sorry." Maya unplugged the display cable from her laptop. She closed the silver lid, the screen going dark. She picked up the computer and tucked it securely under her arm. Finally, she looked directly into his eyes. "Your network is entirely secure now, Mr. Sterling," Maya stated, her voice possessing a quiet, devastating finality. "Good luck with your public offering." She turned around and walked down the center of the long room, leaving the absolute chaos of the boardroom behind her. She did not look back as she pushed the heavy oak doors open and disappeared into the hallway. Liam stood frozen at the podium, watching the empty doorway. He had secured his empire. The $300 million valuation was safe. The fortress was completely intact, and it meant absolutely nothing. 3 days passed. The public offering was a historic, undisputed triumph. At exactly 9 a.m. on Friday morning, the financial markets opened, and Sterling Tech stock soared past every single projection. The corporate valuation broke the $1 billion threshold before noon. Champagne flowed freely on the executive floors. Wealthy investors sent massive floral arrangements that filled the reception area with the heavy, suffocating scent of victory. Liam Sterling sat alone in his corner office. The heavy walnut doors were completely shut, isolating him from the celebration outside. He stared at the center of his pristine glass desk. Resting precisely in the middle was a neatly folded, perfectly clean green barista apron. Maya had left it with security on her way out of the building. Liam reached forward, brushing his thumb across the rough cotton fabric. He had spent his entire adult life equating financial security with absolute safety. He had believed that if he could just build the walls high enough, the people he loved would never get hurt again. But as he looked at the empty apron, the illusion completely shattered. He had protected the fortress, but he had actively destroyed the one person who had fought to defend him. The heavy doors to his office opened without a preliminary knock. Jenna walked in. She did not carry her digital tablet. She did not wear her standard, polite executive smile. She walked directly to the front of his desk and placed a single crisp white envelope onto the glass surface. "What is this, Jenna?" Liam asked, his voice rough from 3 days of severe sleep deprivation. "That is my formal letter of resignation, Mr. Sterling," Jenna stated, her voice possessing a sharp, uncompromising edge. Liam looked up, genuinely startled. "I am doubling your salary. You are receiving a massive equity bonus from the public offering today." "I do not care about the equity bonus," Jenna replied, crossing her arms defensively. "I have spent 5 years managing your schedule, organizing your life, and watching you isolate yourself from the entire world. I accepted it because I thought you were a fundamentally decent man who was simply buried in grief. But what you did to Maya Vance was not grief. It was cowardice." Liam flinched, the words striking him with the brutal force of an absolute truth. "She handed you the undeniable proof," Jenna continued, refusing to soften her tone. "She saved your entire company twice. She made your son smile. And the moment the board of directors threatened your valuation, you threw her to the wolves. You have $1 billion in the bank today, Liam, but you cannot afford to buy back the loyalty you threw away." Liam looked down at the white envelope, and then at the green apron. The crushing weight of his monumental failure settled heavily into his bones. "You are absolutely right," Liam confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I panicked. I chose the predictable variable because I was completely terrified of losing control." Before Jenna could respond, the door to the office opened wider. Leo walked in. He wore his oversized navy blue sweater, holding his educational tablet tightly against his chest. He looked between his father and Jenna, sensing the heavy emotional tension in the room. "Dad," Leo said, his voice small and hesitant, "the logic sequence is broken again." Liam stood up immediately. He walked around the glass desk and knelt down on the thick wool carpet, bringing himself to his son's eye level. "Let me see the sequence, Leo," Liam said gently. Leo held out the tablet. The screen displayed the visual coding maze. The small digital turtle was frozen in the center of the screen, facing a solid red wall. "I tried to tell him to turn right," Leo explained, pointing at the blocks of code. "But he will not move. He is just stuck. I need Maya to fix it. When is she coming back from her long meeting?" Liam felt a sharp, intense pain radiate through his chest. He looked at the digital turtle, trapped entirely by poor instructions, completely unable to move forward. He looked at his son's hopeful, trusting eyes. He could not lie to him. Not any more. "Maya is not in a meeting, Leo," Liam said, his voice breaking slightly. "She left the company. I made a very terrible mistake, and I hurt her feelings. I was wrong." Leo lowered the tablet. His lower lip trembled. "But she promised to be my teacher." You told her to go away? I was scared, Liam admitted, stripping away every single layer of his executive armor. I was scared of everything changing. But I want to fix it. I want to write a new code. Leo looked at him, wiping a stray tear from his cheek with the sleeve of his sweater. Can we go find her? We can bring her a hot chocolate. She likes the whipped cream. Liam looked up at Jenna. The fierce, uncompromising anger in the assistant's eyes had softened into something resembling cautious hope. Jenna, Liam said, standing up, tear up that resignation letter and cancel every single meeting I have for the rest of the day. The public offering can run itself. Where are you going, Mr. Sterling? Jenna asked, a tiny, genuine smile finally pulling at the corner of her mouth. Liam reached onto the desk, grabbing the folded green apron. I am going to Brooklyn, Liam stated, a sudden, fierce determination flooding his veins. I have a massive structural vulnerability to repair. The independent coffee shop in Brooklyn was a world away from the sterile, corporate perfection of the Sterling Tech atrium. At exactly 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, the small cafe smelled heavily of roasted espresso beans, old books, and cinnamon pastries. The walls were lined with mismatched vintage artwork, and a slow, acoustic indie song played softly from a speaker in the corner. Outside, a gentle, freezing November rain fell steadily against the large front window, blurring the passing city traffic into streaks of gray and red light. Maya Vance stood behind the wooden counter, wearing a faded denim shirt and a simple black apron. She felt an incredible sense of peace. In the 3 days since she had walked out of the executive boardroom, her phone had not stopped vibrating. 3 major technology competitors had somehow acquired her contact information, offering her massive salaries to lead their security divisions. The financial press was calling her a genius. She had ignored every single call. She was taking her time. For the very first time in 3 years, her sister's medical debts were entirely paid off. She did not have to rush. She could breathe. She was working a few weekend shifts at the local cafe, just to keep her hands busy, finding comfort in the familiar rhythmic mechanics of the espresso machine. The small brass bell attached to the heavy front door swung backward against the glass, announcing a new arrival. I will be right with you, Maya called out, wiping down the steam wand with a clean white cloth. Take your time, a dark, incredibly familiar voice replied. I hear the service here is worth waiting for. Maya froze. The white cloth slipped from her fingers, landing softly on the wooden counter. She turned around slowly. Liam Sterling stood in the center of the small coffee shop. He did not look like the chief executive officer of a billion-dollar company. The tailored suits and expensive silk ties were completely gone. He wore a thick charcoal gray sweater, dark denim jeans, and a heavy winter coat that was damp from the November rain. Standing exactly beside him, holding his hand tightly, was Leo. Maya felt her heart execute a violent, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She gripped the edge of the wooden counter, desperately trying to maintain her absolute composure. We do not serve corporate executives here, Maya stated, her voice possessing a defensive, icy edge. You are outside of your designated jurisdiction, Mr. Sterling. Liam walked slowly toward the counter. He did not look intimidated. He looked entirely humbled. I did not come here for coffee, Maya, Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent a sudden rush of heat straight down her spine. I came here to surrender. Maya crossed her arms. Surrender implies a war. The war is over. You chose your valuation. You protected your fortress. I am tearing the fortress down, Liam corrected her, stopping directly across the counter from her. He looked into her golden honey eyes, laying all his protective armor completely bare. I spent my entire life avoiding risk. I looked at the digital evidence on that screen, and my mind instantly executed the safest mathematical equation. But human beings are not equations, Maya. Maya felt the sting of tears threatening the corners of her eyes. She refused to let them fall. "Words are incredibly easy, Liam," Maya whispered, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to control it. "You let me walk out of that room alone." "I know," Liam agreed, the profound, heavy regret clearly visible in the sharp lines of his face. "It was the greatest failure of my entire life. I was a coward. I cannot change the logs of the past, Maya. I can only beg you for the administrative privileges to write a new future." He reached into the pocket of his damp winter coat. He did not pull out a corporate bank check. He did not pull out a legal contract. He placed the folded green Sterling Tech apron onto the wooden counter. "You left this behind," Liam said softly, "but you took the entire heart of the company with you." Before Maya could respond, Leo stepped forward, placing his small hands onto the edge of the counter. "Maya," Leo said, his large brown eyes looking up at her with absolute sincerity, "my turtle is still stuck in the maze, and my dad is really sad all the time. He needs a teacher, too." Maya felt her defensive walls completely crumble. The anger and the betrayal melted away, replaced by the overwhelming, undeniable warmth radiating from the small boy and the man standing beside him. "I charge a very high hourly rate for tutoring Leo," Maya managed to say, a fragile, watery smile breaking across her face. Liam reached into his other pocket and produced Leo's educational tablet. He placed it gently onto the wooden counter, pushing it exactly to the center right next to the green apron. "We brought a peace offering," Liam explained, stepping back so she could clearly see the screen. Leo wrote a completely new program. I only assisted with the final syntax. Maya looked down at the glowing screen. It was not the maze game. It was a custom application interface, designed with bright, colorful blocks of logic. The screen displayed a single, perfectly formatted line of text, followed by two massive interactive buttons. User, Maya Vance. Status, Essential Architecture. Query. Will you forgive us and come home? Yes, why, no. A single tear finally escaped, tracing a warm path down Maya's cheek. She looked from the digital screen to Leo's hopeful face, and then up to Liam's dark, entirely vulnerable eyes. He was not asking her to be a lead security analyst. He was not asking her to fix his code. He was asking her to be his partner. "Your user interface is incredibly simple," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We are entirely open to critical feedback," Liam replied, closing the distance between them, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. "For the rest of our lives, if you will let us." Maya reached out. Her finger hovered over the glass screen for a fraction of a second. She pressed the button labeled yes. The screen instantly transitioned into a massive, animated display of bright digital fireworks. Confetti exploded across the pixels, accompanied by a triumphant, cheerful melody from the tablet's small speakers. Leo threw his arms up in the air, cheering loudly in the middle of the quiet Brooklyn cafe. Liam did not hesitate. He moved rapidly around the edge of the wooden counter, invading her workspace completely. He wrapped his strong arms around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. Maya laced her arms around his neck, burying her face into the damp, warm wool of his sweater. He smelled like cold rain, bergamot, and absolute safety. Liam lifted her chin gently, his dark eyes burning with undeniable passion and profound relief. He leaned down and kissed her, It was a kiss that held all the frantic energy of the server room, the intense crackling tension of the elevator, and the sweeping, breathtaking romance of the charity gala. It was a promise recorded permanently into the unalterable architecture of their lives. Maya kissed him back with equal fervor, the last remnants of her fear completely dissolving. She had spent her entire life trying to prove she was more than just an invisible girl in an apron. But standing there, surrounded by the scent of roasted coffee and the cheers of a 6-year-old boy, she finally understood the ultimate truth. She did not need a billionaire to validate her worth. She had saved the empire entirely on her own. But sharing the empire with someone who finally saw her brilliance was the greatest reward of all. And that is exactly how Maya Vance transitioned from steaming milk in the corporate lobby to becoming the most powerful woman in the technology sector. The woman who brought a corrupt executive to absolute justice. The woman who taught a grieving father how to love his son again. The woman who proved that brilliant code can be written anywhere, even in the margins of a coffee-stained notebook. What did you think of Maya's incredible story? The brilliant barista who everyone completely underestimated, but who proved that raw talent and fierce determination will always defeat corporate arrogance. It just requires someone brave enough to step up to the terminal and type the override command. Leave your honest opinion in the comments below. On a scale of 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications to receive more moving, inspiring audio stories exactly like this one. See you in the next video.